The stone block, centuries old and motionless, suddenly came to life, beginning its strange, unpredictable movement, as if a great ancient force was contained in it. From this stone shell, suddenly and swiftly, a monster emerged, aggressive and furious, ready to crush everything in its path. The first thing he did, without thinking for a moment, was to attack the people who were nearby, rushing at them with furious force. The main hunter that stood in his way was our hero, standing with a shield, ready to fight back, although he was not sure of the outcome of the battle. However, his shield, although strong, could not withstand the blow and instantly shattered, leaving the hunter defenseless in the depths of Margoyle's dungeon. The man shouted a warning, but the young hunter, masterfully dodging, did not take the blow, but deflected it to the side, avoiding the deadly attack. The remaining hunters, confident in their abilities, looked at each other and decided that it was time to attack, trying to take control of the situation. One of them, boldly approaching, dexterously delivered a precise blow, easily cutting off one of the monster's enormous limbs. Gradually, everyone joined the fight, surrounding the monster and striking, each one precise and deadly, weakening it with each passing second. And suddenly, literally a moment later, the monster's eyes flashed a bright red light. He radiated a strange, unearthly energy, as if coming to life again. The man with the shield, overcome with rage, screamed, calling for everyone to take a defensive position, and allowed the magic to finish him off. The others, having gathered their courage, agreed to this proposal, and one of the magicians prepared to attack the terrible creature. But soon he turned to the protagonist, jokingly asking why he was still sleeping, offering to pour in some mana. The guy, calling himself Jason Haruto, a level 29th hunter, confidently promised that he would do everything now. Soon the hero began to focus his power as he was asked, feeling the mana rapidly gathering in his hands. The mana quickly manifested, ready to be used, as if waiting for the moment to show its power in battle. He immediately directed it at the petitioner, and the magician, nodding approvingly, said that this would be enough to defeat the great Golem. The enraged creature, gathering all its power, rushed into the attack, threatening everyone who dared to stand in its way. However, the man who was being attacked by the monster used magic, shouting for him to fall to the ground. Very soon, its power, like thunder, struck the creature, splitting it into two parts, like a fragile toy that was torn apart. Finally, the battle was over and the heroes could rest, allowing themselves to relax after the intense battle. A man approached Jason saying that he was, as always, of no help, and offered to help him sort out the loot. Someone pointed out that he deals damage and shouldn't be in the backline, to which they responded that his skills suck, but he regenerates mana infinitely. The interlocutor asked curiously how it was possible to infinitely regenerate mana, because it seemed unimaginable. The hunter replied that both mages and healers can also absorb mana, so it is only needed during the boss fight. The mage noted that this was why Jason had not been able to reach level 30 for 5 years, and why a weak hunter was stronger than an ordinary person. Jason, hearing this, was angry, realizing that they were speaking loudly especially for him, but he didn't care. He wouldn't leave. Soon after all this, the hero found himself in the Tycoon Guild, thinking about what was happening around him. He wondered what this meant. Was he, as a hunter, really being transferred to the production department of the guild? The man replied that no one wanted to take him into the dungeon because he was only level 29, and they wouldn't let him in alone. Jason's only skill left was mana regeneration, and he shouted that his mana had been useful to many, and there was little left until level 30. That's why he asked to give him a chance, but the interlocutor noted that healers and mages usually have mana absorption skills, and he would be a fifth wheel. Besides, does he really think that his level 30th will change anything in his situation with the guild? The guild simply decided to play to his strengths, and producing mana potions is something he would fit in well with. Jason wondered what would happen if he refused. Would he be kicked out of the guild without a chance? They apologized to him and explained that he was not developing, so they could not keep him any longer, because it would only hold him back. Sitting on the bench, the hero realized that in an instant he had lost his job, and everyone considered his skill to be only infinite mana regeneration. But in reality, it was a special skill that he never told anyone about. Surprisingly, he had acquired it before the hunt. Suddenly, a system appeared in front of him, asking if he wanted to copy the item, promising amazing possibilities. The hero, having collected his thoughts, extended his hand and pressed the button, agreeing to this, with the hope of new adventures. Eventually, after a few moments, his food was copied, and the ability was called Control-C and Control-V, which allowed him to copy objects. However, upon awakening, he realized that this skill was rather useless for a hunter, although he was initially delighted with it. It soon became clear that the skill was only available to him, and as soon as the object left his hands, it disappeared like a mirage. So Jason can't copy money or resell gear, but there's something else that pisses him off the most. There are level restrictions to copy equipment, and the Dagger of Loyalty can only be used from level 90. Due to the user's level mismatch, copying the object is impossible, and the boy was nicknamed Mononos for his endless mana regeneration. But in reality, it simply copies and pastes a small amount of absorbed mana, which does not disappear and can be transferred to other hunters. He tried to copy the skills in the same way, but to do this he had to kill the high-level monsters he dreamed of. Then everyone would see what he was capable of. He wanted to reach at least level 30, and heard that the Carrion Dragon Longsword had arrived in Japan. Jason realized that the sword has 2 special skill slots and greatly increases defense, and his method is unique because it has its own level. Once the sword is in hand, the user's level increases by 200, and it can be used from level 13. This is a great legendary sword for a hunter like him. If he copies it, he will become a level 230 hunter. This is a ticket to a happy life. The sword will be shown in Japan in a week, but the legendary blade has only 10% durability left and is only good for a couple of raids. The sword's owners want to make money on it, and Jason realized that this was a great chance. By touching it even once, he could recreate the blade forever. He only had to reach level 30, and in a few days there would be a battle in the lair of a great spider that was not registered with the Hunters Association. The mage turned to Jason, called him a photographer, and asked him to pour in some mana for the upcoming fight. The guy replied that he would do everything now, but he preferred to use his copying technique. Soon the flow of power was directed towards his comrade, helping him in battle and enhancing his magical abilities. The magician exclaimed that this was wonderful, and using his power, he shouted for them all to burn in the fire of battle. The spiders fell one after another, and Jason couldn't help but think how much he hated fire mages in a confined space. After the battle, Jason decided to check his level in the system, hoping to see progress and be prepared for the upcoming battle. The guy approached him, reminding him that status checks would not change the outcome. But the hero wanted to prepare for the fight with the boss. His guildmate David Aoi jokingly suggested that this front-row performance cost money, but Jason didn't understand what kind of fee he was talking about. David said that after it was over they would get together and have a drink, and Jason knew that the man was going down into an unregistered dungeon. He earns money by leveling up, but also takes food from it, knowing that this is a dangerous place, not registered with the Hunters Association. Thanks to David, the hero was able to accompany high-ranking hunters. Someone shouted that it was time to finish and move on to the boss arena. The first man stopped and quietly told everyone to stop, because ahead was the clutch of the great spider, and this meant danger. Indeed, they were approaching the cave where the spider lived, as well as its eggs, which hinted at the coming battle. This creature was named Alex, and he was the boss of a level 80 dungeon, which inspired fear in all hunters. Jason felt like his knees were going weak just looking at it, and he didn't know if he could easily handle the horror. David, encouraging Jason, asked what he was afraid of because it was easy to kill the great spider, but caution would not hurt. The main thing is to watch her web carefully, because once caught, no one will get out, and the eggs should also be avoided. If you break the eggs, the spider will go berserk and then everyone will have a hard time, so you need to be extremely careful. The mage, displeased, shouted at Aoi, asking why he was wasting time on Mononos, as if he couldn't keep quiet. The interlocutor apologized, but reminded them that they didn't have time, and that he shouldn't distract them, since they hired him out of the kindness of their hearts. After this, David moved forward and kicked one of the stones, which led to unexpected consequences. The stone flew to the side and caught the web that stretched everywhere, attracting attention. As soon as the stone caught, a loud sound was heard, foreshadowing trouble for the hunters. Soon, the mistress of the dungeon realized that there were uninvited guests here, and this made her angry. She immediately went berserk and charged at the hunters preparing for battle. The man with the shield shouted at him to be quiet, as his shouts had woken up the spider. He had a shield, which allowed him to defend himself from the blow, but it was not enough. He counterattacked with his sword, demanding that she remove her hairy legs from him, fearing her attacks. At the same time, he reminded the others about her web and eggs, warning them of the possible danger. The rest of the hunters understood and immediately rushed to attack from different sides, hoping to win. A bloody battle ensued between the hunters and the spider, and they fought bravely for their lives. Jason watched, thinking about how they fought, and hoping that maybe he could level up to 30. The dungeon boss realized that these hunters were not easy to deal with and took other actions. The man shouted to the others that the creature had started to release webs and that everyone needed to hide behind the columns. The wizard, unafraid, exclaimed that he had defeated such creatures more than once and intended to burn the spider along with her web. Alexa didn't stop and continued to release webs in huge quantities, creating an atmosphere of horror. A protective ball began to form right in front of her, which she intended to use for defense. However, the wizard's fire continued to approach and burned everything in its path, setting fire to the space around it. As the fire reached the web cluster, it slowed down dramatically, and the boy screamed in horror as the spider deflected his fireball. He shouted that this was bad, because she was angry and would now show everyone her true power. Jason yelled at him not to do this, as such behavior would only make the situation worse. But the wizard didn't listen, using the meteor shower skill, determined to show off his strength. The man shouted that he was absolutely stupid because he could hit her balls, which would be a disaster. The heroes already understood that everything was bad, because there was no time left to fix it. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that the eggs were already damaged and destroyed, which foreshadowed trouble. The man in the bandana screamed that everything was bad, and everyone needed to run away immediately, otherwise the spider would go berserk. Soon, the spider's web struck one of the hunters, confirming the group's fears. David yelled at Jason to run behind the column as the spider began shooting webs in all directions. Alexa was furious. Her anger was palpable, and the energy emanated from her like a dark storm. Another hunter also fell into her web, realizing that everything was not going as planned. The same wizard who destroyed the eggs was asking in a panic why his fireball didn't work on the web. Things got worse as his voice caught the boss's attention, making him nervous. He got scared and started begging to stop without doing anything unnecessary, but it was too late. Panic took hold of him, and he continued to shout for her not to come near him and to get away from them. Naturally, Alexa didn't hear him and, using her limbs, killed him instantly. The main character was horrified by what happened, his eyes filled with shock. He himself found himself caught in a web and understood that the situation was truly critical. Alexa, like a predator, continued to approach, destroying everyone who got in her way. Jason thought that this dungeon should be easy, and he just wanted to raise one miserable level, but now he was risking his life. Very soon, Alexa approached him, preparing to attack. Her intentions were clear. She swung her limb but missed, only slightly wounding the boy, leaving him a chance to survive. Despite this, he understood that everything was very bad, and he was running out of time. At this point, the system asked if he wanted to copy the selected object and paste it in place. In fact, this opened up new possibilities for him. Objects usually disappeared after being copied, but this rule did not apply to his body. So he decided to create a copy of himself, because if he died, his consciousness would move to the new version. The dead body will disappear without a trace, as has happened more than once. Jason thought that all this was terrible, and he would never get used to such sights. But he had no other choice in this situation, and he understood it. As soon as the boy moved into his new copied body, the monster attacked again. He used his ability again and, hiding behind a column, he understood that this creature would not leave him alone. Even if it were copied endlessly, nothing would change, and this made him wary. Suddenly he heard a sound and wondered if David was still alive because he was begging for help. Jason felt sad. He apologized and realized that he could not help his friend. Alexa, hearing the voice, immediately headed towards him, preparing for a new attack. Jason watched this and realized that the situation was getting out of control. The boy rushed forward, deciding that David had helped him when everyone else had refused. And if he didn't help now, then what kind of friend was he? He ran closer to his opponent and tried to hit him with the weapon. The attack was successful, but because of this action, the guy lost concentration and was confused for a moment. When he came to his senses a little and looked up, he realized with relief that his friend was not hurt. At the same time, a system notification arrived, informing that the level had been increased. The main character was stunned and wondered how he could level up. It turned out that his attack had somehow worked, and it filled him with hope. However, his joyful thoughts were interrupted by Alexa, who pierced him with her limb. Jason shifted into another body again, and thought that since he had leveled up, he needed to copy the carrion dragon's longsword. He shouted that everything would be fine, because if she couldn't escape, he would kill her, even if he had to die 100 times. At the same time, he thought that the main thing was to inflict at least some damage in one life and rush to attack, believing that with his skill, she had no chance. It was only a matter of time before this creature died. 3 days had passed since he had begun to fight, and he had fought day and night, wasting about 50 lives. In the process, he broke almost all the weapons the group brought with them, but his skills improved significantly. The great spider was becoming weaker with each passing minute. Fortunately, he had no regeneration. After another limb that Alexa lost, she turned her back to the guy. Then she prepared to attack and began to release her web. Jason knew this wouldn't do any good and started to run away. But surprisingly, she fired 4 projectiles at once. He tried to dodge, but suddenly he saw the creature's limb in front of him. It seemed like he couldn't avoid this attack, but he successfully jumped up, avoiding the blow. And without stopping, he continued his movement forward, full of determination. Jason soon got close to the creature's head and prepared to attack. He was completely confident in himself and shouted for it to finally die already. Gathering all his strength for this blow, he struck the head. Literally a moment later, the sword he had attacked with broke into pieces. The guy realized that everything was really bad because he forgot to copy and paste. Soon his body fell to the ground and he hit it quite hard. And the creature he was fighting became even more angry and prepared to attack him. Jason realized that things were really bad for him right now. At that very moment, something strange happened. The spider's eyes went out and began to glow differently. Then her body split and began to fall apart. In front of him, the main character saw only the explosion of his rival's body. Jason was delighted with what had happened. He was glad that he had finally defeated this hairy wretch. Now that he had won, the levels started to rise one after another, and the system reported that he had received the reward for destroying the great spider. The hero grabbed David and yelled at him to hold on, reminding him that they wanted a drink after clearing the dungeon. He promised to treat him to the best whiskey. When he was distracted by the conversation, he soon felt someone attack him in the side. Naturally, the guy lost concentration and fell, so he turned his attention upward. There appeared small spiders called newborn babies of the level 30 great spider. The hero shouted that they were mocking him because he no longer had a weapon. He knew it would be difficult to fight while protecting Aoi. The boy rushed to his friend and covered him with his body while the small spiders attacked. The creature that was the first to rush into battle was cut into pieces within moments. The others saw this and, becoming wary, began to move back a little. And then the whole crowd attacked the man who had killed their fellow man. The girl who started fighting them used the Hellfire skill, and the small spiders were destroyed in the blink of an eye. The protagonist realized that Hellfire is the highest spell of fire magic, and in the whole world there are only a few magicians who can freely control it. If the guy's memory serves him right, there is only one such magician in Japan. And now we are talking about a knight who uses a witch's sword, and she is ranked 5th in the Japanese hunter rankings. It was she who interrupted the guy's thoughts and asked if they were the only survivors. Jason looked at her and said regretfully that it was true. Elizabeth noticed the dead people and realized that the great spider's babies had appeared, meaning the eggs had cracked, and she became furious. It seems like the high-level group was completely wiped out. Was this man really able to defeat the dungeon boss, and even in the company of low-level hunters, which left many questions? Soon, the main character found himself in the Japanese Hunters Association. He was in interrogation room number 2 and said that if the girl hadn't come, everything could have ended badly. He was really grateful to her. The head of the dungeon management also expressed his gratitude. The girl replied that she had simply done her job and had a free minute. All the items and reports about the great spider were turned in, so she said Jason could go now. And she thought it would be nice if she could leave too. The guy noticed that a group of high-level adventurers had bought themselves a pass. It was an unregistered dungeon, and they died there almost in full force, so are they really just being released? The interlocutor asked if he really wanted to stay, since adventurers die every day in dozens, if not hundreds, of unregistered dungeons. They signed consent to this risk in their entry and exit declarations, not to mention low-level hunters. They pay bribes to illegally participate in dungeons in order to level up, and the association simply turns a blind eye to it. The desire to become stronger is natural for any hunter, although it is illegal, but it contributes to their growth. The girl also asked if there were any other questions. Jason said he had nothing. Everything was explained to him clearly, and he was grateful for that. The girl said that payments for the items of the large spider provided to them should arrive in a few days. The hero thanked her, refused, and added that she had already given everything to Aoi. A few moments after these words, he immediately disappeared from this place. The interlocutor thought that he was clearly a difficult person, since he refused an award that was very valuable. Regardless, he was able to clear a high-level dungeon on his own, and Hunter Jason is definitely worth revealing. The main character, in turn, walked down the corridor and was glad that everything was fine with him. He then ordered the system to open his inventory and saw that he had the Great Spider's Rod in his possession. Since he had used his copy skill at that moment, he had a lot of rods, and Jason knew that these rods would be very useful to him. A few hours earlier, the system reported that he had received a reward item for destroying the Great Spider. The Great Spider's rod has the same effects as the Great Spider's web, and when used, it exhibits strong adhesive properties for a certain period of time. The available level for this ability was 40. The hero did not understand what it would look like, but according to the description, it looks like ordinary glue. All that death and work was for this thing. Maybe it could be used as a fly and mosquito tape, so he copied it just in case. After that, he tapped on the thing and did not understand how to use it. Soon, something strange began to happen to her, and she began to turn around. Jason asked what the hell happened and where she disappeared to, and the system reported that the Great Spider's rod had been absorbed by an existing skill. The guy asked in surprise what this was. Could this ability really be upgraded? Indeed, the system confirmed that the ability to copy an object could be improved, and the hero was surprised again. After that, the system reported that the ability to insert an object was increased to a new level, and 3 skill options appeared. Jason did not understand why they could be upgraded. Is it related to getting the core? Then, if the copying absorbs the corresponding items, it will also evolve. It was really very cool. By the way, what was said recently about new options? Jason saw that the first option is an established subject, which can be held for the desired time, and the second object, which can be inserted anywhere for a while. And the third option is to untie the web of the Great Spider. The hero thought that this was a useless skill, but now he will try it first for 1 minute. After a few moments, an item appeared from the inventory. Jason knew he'd let go of it, but it hadn't disappeared, which was pretty damn cool. However, after the scheduled time had passed, the item began to disappear. The hero realized that he had not disappeared for a whole minute, and that was wonderful. In that case, he decided to copy as much as possible and set the timer for 30 minutes and then do it for 100 or 1,000. At the moment, in the Hunters Association, he was very happy and laughing, attracting attention. Jason thought that from today on he would be rich and would finally be able to live like a human being. First of all, he needed to copy the sword of the Carizian dragon. 2 hours ago, a truck was speeding across the Rainbow Bridge in Tokyo. The road was quite busy, but nothing stopped him from driving. The lead car was ordered to maintain speed and distance, and was told that they would maintain the current speed. George, a level 112 hunter in the International Hunters Association, turned to his interlocutor and asked how many times the girl had already been to Japan. Lucy replied that she had been twice, and her level was 131, and her class was a magician. The man noticed that she had said that her mother was from these lands. She must be very happy to be back here, he noted. But the girl noted that this was her mother's homeland, but not hers, so she simply didn't care. George asked if it was true that the longsword exhibition would end in Japan and if she had applied for leave. The companion remarked that there was something she wanted to find in the Japanese dungeons. The man remarked that he hoped that this time she would find what she was always looking for. Lucy noted that it was none of his business, but one day it would affect him too. The lead car reported that they were currently passing through the underground area on the Rainbow Bridge. Due to the electromagnetic waves of the dungeon, communication will be interrupted for only 5 minutes. George noted that this dungeon is right above the sea, and isn't that problematic? The girl replied that he was talking nonsense because if the dungeon collapsed, it would be a disaster. The interlocutor said that someone should open the window because it was stuffy here. Lucy asked what was romantic about a dangerous dungeon. The man noted that she simply did not understand, because that was the whole point. At the same time as on the Rainbow Bridge, an event was taking place in the office of the entrance to the dungeon. Roger, a level 21 newbie from the Great Sages Guild, said that it was so boring to work as a ticket collector at the exit of a dungeon. The man next to him remarked that he was lucky, and that he was even showing off because 3 weeks ago it was just hell on earth here. The interlocutor felt something strange approaching him, and it hit him. He noticed the creature and asked what it was. After looking closely, he saw that it was a slug and it was so cute, but he thought that he had forgotten it in this dungeon. So he turned to the man and asked if it was possible for a slug to appear on the surface. The man looked at him and said, "Of course not." Just as he wanted to add something to his statement, he suddenly heard some sound. The footsteps were so loud that the man immediately became wary and reluctantly looked back. The creature that the people saw before them was of enormous size and covered them both with its shadow. After this, the huge troll immediately rushed to attack the people. At this time, the main character was observing his condition and carefully examining his characteristics. Some of his skills were increased by 30 as well as 18 points. His class level was 4th and his skill level was 1st. Jason said that everything was great because his stats had increased. It was not for nothing that he died so many times, and now he was level 50. Once a hunter reaches this level, it is easier for him to join a group. Usually in mid-level dungeons, the monsters are around the same level. With the exception of the newbie zones, these dungeons will give you faster experience and more reward items, sometimes even rare ones. Therefore, it is easier to level up. And to begin with, the guy decided to create duplicates of the Great Spider's rods and try to sell them at auction. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by people who were offending others and rushing to make way. They were all in quite a hurry and did not understand how this dungeon could collapse. Jason wondered how the dungeon had collapsed, but was it really a breakthrough? The hunter shouted why they were thrown there earlier. More Guild's interlocutor answered that they said the van with the legendary sword fell into a trap. So a request for help came from the International Hunters Association. The hero wondered if this was really the long sword of the Kyrian dragon. It turns out that he is surrounded by monsters because of the breakthrough. And it's all bad. Flying ships were gathering on the roof of the Hunters Association. The hunters asked to quickly request help from other guilds. Their first priority is to protect the van with legendary items. The man asked what nonsense this was, who gave this order. Then the girl said that she was giving orders now, and was the commander of their squad. It was Elizabeth who said that she was ordering them to destroy the monsters and protect the civilians, and that this was the top priority. The situation is emergency, so all questions should be left for later. The subordinate said that he had no questions. Suddenly, the girl turned her attention to the side and saw some strange situation there. The guy tried to break through to the roof and said that he wanted to too, so he asked them to move away. The commander said that they were in a hurry, so she told him to sit down quickly. Jason shouted for the mistress to let him come with them because he wanted to help too. But those who were holding him said that he couldn't do that. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked if this was really Mr. Jason. The hero said that he would go too, and if he couldn't fight the monsters, he would be able to evacuate the citizens, because in such a situation, any help would be useful. The commander looked at him carefully, assessing the situation, and gave her consent. That is why the hunter's ship soon took to the skies and headed towards the scene. Elizabeth said that at the dungeon and the Great Spider he managed to save his comrade. And now he wants to help evacuate civilians, and this is commendable. Jason smiled and thought that he was actually pursuing his own goals. The man asked if it was strange that only 3 weeks had passed since the Rainbow Bridge breach was closed. The commander noted that anything could happen in their world, including another dungeon breakthrough. And no matter how many times this happens, they will go to the epicenter each time, so as not to repeat the catastrophe of 15 years ago. After these words, those present covered their mouths, and everyone remembered what happened then. The hero thought that he remembered these events as if it all happened yesterday. It was then that simultaneous dungeon breakthroughs occurred all over the world. And they call the guy what happened an international level of disaster. This happens if you don't exterminate enough monsters in the dungeon. In this case, the dungeons become overcrowded and collapse, creating a breach. And then the monsters break out, attacking civilians. It was in that very chaos that the protagonist's parents died. He still hasn't told anyone about it, and no one would believe him. But at that moment, a supernatural being from another dimension appeared, who gave him what seemed to be a curse. Naturally, the boy was very frightened when this happened. The creature called him a gift and set a term of 20 years. Naturally, the guy doesn't know whether this means the duration of his abilities or his life. But the hourglass of the curse continues to tick even now. As Jason recalled what had happened, he also thought about his time limit. Also, thoughts appeared in my head that it was then that the creature appeared through a great catastrophe. This means that when it appears again, another cataclysm will occur, and there are only 5 years left until that time. The boy realized that he needed to develop his abilities, become the strongest hunter, and perhaps he would be able to prevent the disaster and lift the curse. But for this, he desperately needs the blade of the Kyrian dragon. Meanwhile, explosions were heard on the Rainbow Bridge. Civilians abandoned their cars and began to run away from the monsters that emerged from the breach. Naturally, hunters arrived at the scene and tried to fight them. The guy looked and thought that there were too few of them, and they would not be able to protect all the civilians. At that moment, a goblin appeared behind him and tried to attack him. But the man noticed him and easily killed him, cutting him into several pieces. Although the attacks on him at that moment had not yet stopped, because there were a huge number of monsters and they were attacking. Since the guy didn't have time to react to this attack, a man from the outside helped him. He turned to the youth and told him not to count crows when he fought. The interlocutor smiled in response to this and expressed his gratitude. The senior hunter said that if he relaxed again, he should not expect help. Roger understood that he did not mince words and called him a bait. However, it was the elder who saved him from the orc, and today was the second time he had helped him out. So the boy is definitely going to pay him back. The man noticed that he seemed to have lost a lot of blood and was feeling sick. Roger asked, "By the way, if there was any news about help," the interlocutor answered that because of the magnetic waves of the dungeon they cannot contact them. But they probably already know about the situation and are heading there, so people should run to the beginning of the bridge. In that case, they would meet with reinforcements faster, the guy asked. "Really there," the elder answered, "it doesn't matter. It's better than even giving in to one's death here. That's why, let him not lag behind and follow him." A huge monster attacked the van. This creature was level 190 and was called the Bear King. George asked the girl if she was sure everything would be okay. Lucy replied that she understood his concerns. But at the same time, she asks not to exaggerate too much, since her protective magic is at the highest level, which is why even a level 400 bridge cannot scratch it. At the same time, the bridge they were on began to gradually collapse. Lucy said that everything was bad, because even the strongest protective magic would not protect against this. Roger was also horrified, asking what the hell was going on. The association's ships were already quite close and were preparing to land. Suddenly, one of the pilots looked ahead and immediately shouted to the commander that there was something ahead. This interested the girl and she naturally looked there. The guy started saying that this is the boss of the Rainbow Bridge dungeon, and his name is Quisha. Elizabeth was horrified when she saw him and shouted for everyone to prepare for impact. The huge monster opened its equally large mouth and prepared to attack with magic. So, after a very short period of time, everything that was in the path of this beam was destroyed. The bridge, which was also in front of him, collapsed due to the onslaught of this creature. Jason wondered if that thing had destroyed the bridge. It was too bad. Hopefully his longsword was intact. The dungeon boss looked at the other ships in the sky and felt threatened by them. So he opened his mouth again and prepared to attack them. After a few moments, the magic beam began to hit these ships, as well as the bridge. Therefore, the hunters, led by the commander, began to jump out of the damaged ship. Elizabeth landed and told everyone to listen to her, and they were changing the plan. All forces should focus on destroying Quaishi. Everyone immediately agreed to this, but the girl wondered where Mr. Jason was. After that, she smiled sweetly and was sure that everything was okay with him, because right now she has a strong premonition that he will not die just like that. She prepared to attack with her magic and immediately used Hellfire. It was aimed at the dungeon boss. The hero realized that this was only the second time he saw it, but it was really impressive and would have to be copied later. Jason landed somewhere nearby, and the system was chosen to untangle the web of the Great Spider. The guy thought that his main task now was to copy the longsword of the Corisian dragon. A group of masked men moved forward, and the commander was told that Quaishi's appearance was unexpected. One wrong move, and they too could be in danger. The commander said, on the contrary, it is to his advantage because the hunter Elizabeth and the rest of the association will be busy for some time. Destroying the boss is a quick way to collapse the breakthrough. And during this time, he will not take the long sword of the Corisian dragon. You should move quietly so as not to stumble upon monsters. The main character moved forward and saw that there were a lot of dead monsters there. Obviously, this was the work of hunters. The only problem was that these creatures usually acted in secret and he had a bad feeling about it. Suddenly, Pamu heard a man shouting at him to run away right now. Roger continued to fight these wolves and said that he would not run away because he could handle such monsters. The elder one was wounded and told him to listen to him, because he needed to run, otherwise they would both be finished. The interlocutor asked how he could leave him. Jason wondered if it was the hunters who were controlling the entrance to the dungeon, and one of them was wounded. He decided that he couldn't get distracted and needed to focus on his goal, and that they would somehow manage on their own. The man shouted to his comrade that he didn't know. Why are these low-ranking dogs in such a difficult dungeon? When they gather in packs, their power is equivalent to a high-level sharp one. But if he saw several such creatures, then everything is already very bad. And all this is because in this case there are a lot of them. These were bad wolf monsters of the 15th level. They are usually low level, but they gather in packs of 20 or 30 individuals. Roger was determined to fight and said he didn't care. All this is because the elder received all these wounds because of him, and now it is his turn to protect him. When the main character heard this, he immediately stopped and turned his attention there. Then I thought about how I saved David and asked him to hold on, because they needed to get out of here. The monsters just started to get closer because they could smell the victim. The bravest of them was the first to attack the man with the weapon. But naturally, the guy noticed this attack and easily cut off his head. The next one was attacked by a monster that was to the side and saw an open area. Roger also noticed this attack, so he used his weapon to block it. And then, he made a small feast and plunged the blade into the neck. Now the man was attacking the monster that was behind him. The guy felt this attack and realized that he had no time to dodge it. At the same time, the main character came to his aid and pushed the animal away with his shoulder. It turned out that it was quite a strong attack, and that is why the wolf was killed. Jason turned to the stranger and asked if he was okay. The interlocutor noted that everything is fine, but not for long, because there are still many of them there. Indeed, the creature kept coming and coming. Roger thanked him for his help and told him to run away faster. And all this is because even high-level hunters will not be able to cope with such a huge pack. The main character stood in front and deprived, smiled, saying that it was excellent. Roger asked in surprise what he was carrying. Jason took advantage of the system and decided to put them up for auction a little later. The wolves just saw a new victim and prepared to attack him. The guy at that moment thought that if he combined the rod of the great spider with his skill, something would happen. He had always wondered how effective it would be against a large group of monsters. Roger saw several of the creatures rushing at the guy and thought that he had already been torn to pieces. Well, it wasn't that simple, because the system said that the rod of the great spider with the second version of the skill was used. Just because of this, a large amount of cobwebs appeared and wrapped around. The wolves that attacked the hero were tied up and could not move. All this happened with more and more victims who were being dragged somewhere. During this experimental action, all the waves were linked together. The system informed Jason that the level had been increased. He noted that simply linking did not give a large increase in level. However, as expected, the move works great against the pack. But he needs to find a way to attack after binding. Roger thought he had disabled the entire pack in one go. Well, what kind of skill is this? Maybe it's something high level? The man thanked him for his help and asked if by any chance he was reinforcement from the association. The guy answered that everything was correct and thought that they had arrived on the same helicopter, so he was not lying. In fact, the interlocutor said that in this case he was asking to pick up his partner. Roger shouted at him that there was no need, because he would not abandon him even at the cost of his life. The elder replied that with this man he would be safe. Jason was surprised at how loyal this man was, because he shouted that he would never leave alone. The hero thought that in any case, in such a state, they were both in danger. It was a pity, of course, but there was no other way out, and besides, it was just a copy. So he ordered the inventory to open and took out a bottle from there, then held it out and told him to take it. The man said that it was the same, and the guy continued that with this mid-level potion he wouldn't be able to fight, but he would definitely be able to stand on his feet. The elder asked him why he was giving him such a valuable thing. The hero smiled and said that his partner would definitely not return home without him. Roger was very inspired by his speech and thought how cool he really was. Therefore, he expressed his deep gratitude and said that his name was Roger Satoru, and he controlled the entrance to the dungeon, asking that they at least remember his name. Because in the future he will definitely promise to pay back for everything, the hero asked if he could ask him for help. He's looking for the International Hunters Association van, and could they tell him where it is? Because he's just a topographical idiot. The guy was surprised by what he heard and asked if you, the hunter, really don't know your way around. Around this same time, the Bear King continued to tear and break everything around him. But after Lucy used her magic on him, he immediately fell to the ground. George asked if she just put him to sleep. Even though he is a hunter, he is a pacifist, and that is impressive. At the same time, some kind of metal ball flew towards them, but it was cut into several pieces. Because the man noticed it, and was easily amazed by the rest of the weapon. Then he smiled and said that he knew it. Someone would take advantage of this chaos to steal the sword. So do they really think that they were the first to think of this? And after that, he asked these vile cowards to come out. The girl saw who it was and was very surprised. The leader of these people came out and said that their insight was simply impressive. In that case, they would see what these people were capable of. Immediately after his own words, he immediately rushed into the attack. The first to take the hit was George, who easily blocked the attack with his sword. When he did, he said that they should not be underestimated because they are guards of legendary weapons. So they shouldn't think that it will be so easy to deal with them. The opponent then started to run away, and the man shouted for him to stop and chase after him. Lucy realized it was a trap and shouted at him not to run there. But it was already too late, because the man felt that something was wrong with his body. After this, he immediately fell to his knees and blood gushed from his mouth. The ally was worried about him and ran closer, but the man did not understand what was happening to him. Lucy shouted that they sprayed a poison that deals damage and blocks mana absorption for a while. So if he continues to fight, it will kill him. The captain of the attackers said that this mage had good intuition. They underestimated them, and this was just their usual way of working. The interlocutor noted another common way to use poison against people, despite the association's ban. If so, then good. And she will make them regret what they did 100 times, maybe even 1,000. The enemy wizard used fire and said, as a magician who is unable to use mana, he is going to do this. Stop singing her praises. Let her just die. But the longsword will definitely belong to them. At the moment when the man tried to attack her, the head flew off her shoulders. The attackers did not understand what was happening and saw the animal rise up. Besides the bears, at the same time he came to his senses and prepared to attack these people. Due to its enormous size and ferocity, they could do nothing against it, and so fell victim. The animal knocked down its opponents and threw them in different directions. Then, without any mercy at all, she finished them off with her own huge limbs. The enemy captain realized that the girl had done it and shouted that she was a scoundrel. It turns out that the bear wasn't dead and she just put it to sleep, so we need to retreat. The rest were already dead and torn to pieces. The animal went to other people, and the girl noticed that now it was their turn. George wondered if she might just try to put him to sleep again, and the interlocutor asked if he had really forgotten, since she couldn't absorb mana right now. The comrade said that he knew that her pacifism would one day turn against them. It seemed like his bet had finally won today. The girl replied that it was indeed so, but he was not obliged to die because of his own fault. Immediately after these words, she headed forward to fight. Several magic circles appeared in her hands, with which she was going to attack. Her partner noticed what had happened and asked her what she was doing. But Lucy, in turn, did not stop and continued to run straight towards her opponent. Of course, due to the use of mana, her body was negatively affected by the poison. As she thought, absorbing mana completely blocked her abilities. The Bear King saw that the victim was heading straight towards him and immediately tried to attack it. Lucy realized that she couldn't do anything, and so she mentally changed in front of her partner. But what she saw before her eyes stunned her, because the hero used his skill. A web appeared in front of the bear and began to spread throughout the area. She also touched the bear's huge limbs, to which she clung. Therefore, very soon his body was almost completely covered in webbing, which bound him. The creature could not understand what was happening, and therefore screamed very loudly. But nothing could be done about it, and very soon it fell to the ground. After what happened, the main character approached him and stopped near the muzzle. Roger said that it was just wonderful, because he caught the king of the bears in one fell swoop, and it was impressive. The hero thought that he himself was in shock, because he didn't think that he would succeed. The boy called Jason older again and said that he was really cool. He asked why he called him that. You are not almost the same age. The interlocutor noted that he, as well as the man, saved his life, so he should respect and honor both of them. The hero thought that now he would not get rid of this man. Then he turned to the conveyors and asked if everything was okay with them, since they were from an international association. After what happened, Lucy was very surprised, so she stood there and said nothing. George stood up and asked if they had come for the sword too. Jason replied that it was not so. They came for Togo, to help protect him. The man only replied that they had been attacked by a group of robbers and why should they be trusted now. The guy turned his attention to the side and realized that these corpses came for the longsword, but the Bear King killed them. But now it was unclear what to do because it seemed like he was about to attack. The man actually stood there with a very distrustful look and stared at these people. Roger shouted, "Is this how you should thank your saviors? He risked his life for them and they call him a robber. This man is a hunter from the Japanese Association. Here he and his elder are the controllers of this dungeon." The hero thought that he was just in time. That's why all he had to do was season everything with creme fraiche sauce, so he said to quietly open the inventory. Then he took out a mid-level potion and said that they hadn't drunk it yet. Since it was something similar to their wounds, it was quite serious. He thought that he would do everything to get to the sword of the Carisian dragon, and that this investment would more than pay for itself. So he said not to be shy and just go to the corner and drink this potion, so the guards took them in their hands. Lucy looked at the mixture in her hands with some distrust. Then I turned my attention to the Bear King, who was very angry but could not do anything. At the same time, they had to blue, helicopters, and planes of the Hunting Association appeared. The man said he thought the cavalry had arrived, and Roger asked if that meant they would soon be rescued. The interlocutor replied that he was not sure about this because something here seemed wrong, something was happening, and these guys had a completely different task. Around the same time, Elizabeth was fighting the Dungeon King on the bridge. Soon she shouted to stop attacking because this creature had entered its third phase, and it would be attacking the area in all directions. It turns out that the support guild has arrived, So we should buy time until the evacuation of citizens is completed. The rest shouted that everyone understood. Suddenly, some man asked her if she really thought that this would stop the breakthrough into the dungeons. Then he smiled and said that they had not seen this lady for a long time. The girl noticed the man and realized that he was Ricardo Masato, a hunter, as well as a level 503 dark mage and the head of the Guild of the Future. Elizabeth looked at him in surprise and asked what he was doing here. The interlocutor noted that he did not understand the purpose of this stupid question, and the girl asked if he really wanted to do what she was now thinking about. Indeed, the man used his magic, and a huge magic circle appeared in front of the boss of this dungeon. Elizabeth shouted to stop immediately, because if he couldn't defeat him with this spell, then everything would be bad. Ricardo said that worrying about such trivial things won't achieve anything. Last time during the sealing of the dungeon on the Rainbow Bridge, there was an association, and also her. Together they did almost everything, and this time he will not remain on the sidelines, so this is his prey, and he will take everything for himself, so he used the Dark Lightning skill. The girl realized what was about to happen, so she shouted to everyone else to run away from here right now. And the power that the dark magician used had already begun to spread throughout the area and affected people. How this obvious force was struck, and the dungeon boss, who immediately fell to the ground. When the monster fell, its body broke through the bridge and a huge gap appeared in it. The main character, in turn, was able to successfully hold on with his hand. And then, using his strength, he rose up and thought that he was already finished. But everything was fine. After he came to a little feeling, he turned his attention to the side. There he saw the rest of the people he had slept with his power, as well as the van. But he thought that everything was fine, because the van was okay, and everyone else was too. After that, something huge caught his attention off to the side, because now he was right next to the huge big boss of the dungeon. Jason was very surprised when he realized that it was Keisha. It was unclear how he ended up here. Was he really dead and had apparently been captured? At the same time, a dark magician appeared and said, "Are there really any survivors here?" It seems that this person is a low-level hunter, which is commendable. Jason looked at him carefully and realized that he had seen this symbol somewhere, and this was the third most powerful guild in the country of the future. The guy said that he seemed to be from a support guild, but shouldn't saving citizens and killing monsters be his priority? The man asked what he was. He said salvation. Once, and the destruction of monsters is strange. Let him look. It seems that all the citizens have already evacuated, but it seems that he still hears someone, and it is not Quisha. So it turns out that it was the Bear King who was tied up. Ricardo touched the web and asked what it was, if it was the web of the great spider, but he didn't even know that it could be used like that. At that very second, the web that bound the huge creature began to crumble, and the king of the bears himself was destroyed with just one touch of the dark magician. The hero realized that he had torn that web with one snap of his fingers, and she, in turn, was able to hold a 200-level monster and a 25-ton van, and even turned a bear into mincemeat in the process. Is it possible that the boss of the Rainbow Bridge dungeon is also his doing? The hero immediately paid attention to his system because he saw some messages. There, in turn, it was said that several dozen levels were increased, and the system also reported that it was not possible to receive an item for defeating the Bear King. Ricardo asked, what was that? Was it the sound of a level up? Was it that weak monster he caught? Then he apologized, because it seemed that the web had stolen his prey, and also this bear cub. He didn't think that it was his doing, so he accidentally dealt the final blow and took the reward. Then he threw her down and said to keep the claws of the Bear King for himself. He doesn't need them, so let them take them, because they don't like to take someone else's. The leading role looked at him coldly and then said, "Listen carefully." But suddenly Elizabeth appeared and asked if it was Mr. Jason, and the guy also paid attention to her. The girl immediately began to think that everything would happen as she thought. Ricardo asked if they knew each other, which meant that he was also from the association. Now it was clear to him why he didn't like him right away. Elizabeth asked what happened. The guy responded, "Nothing special." Then she noticed that the support team was now evacuating citizens. Let the guy leave with them, because if Keisha wakes up, he will start to rage. The hero asked if there was a way to kill him. The interlocutor sadly said that, unfortunately, this was impossible. She understood that the boss monsters, when their health dropped below 33%, would activate rage, or an area attack happens instantly. In both cases, they attack in different directions, and weak mini-bosses usually only activate frenzy. This requires less concentration without the need to split the fight into phases. But such strong bosses have a very large amount of health and activate 2 attacks. Therefore, their battle is divided into phases. In the third phase, Quasha, feeling a threat to life, carries out large-scale destructive attacks that can destroy everything around. He is currently in his third phase and is protecting himself with a barrier, absorbing mana from the environment, making any attacks useless at this time. Elizabeth screamed all was bad because he woke up earlier than they expected. The man said that just in time before he started releasing massive attacks. So he's going to turn it into a bunch of rewards after using his abilities. The girl told Jason that he thought he would be able to get out alive this time. Ricardo noted that it was unlikely that such a weakling would not survive this battle. In any case, if she's lying, I should blame them. The mortality rate of low-ranking hunters is higher than in road accidents. When the guild leader said this phrase, he immediately rushed to attack using his powers. The hero picked up the reward for the Bear King and realized that it was the head of the guild of the future. At the same time, he thought that he had not intended to do all this, but he would kill Quaisha first. So he's going to mix this man with feces and he'll see it in the future. Roger soon wondered if Jason had saved him again. Lucy was in a bad mood again and looked at the web with distrust. The guy turned to the guards and said that he had a request for them. The dungeon boss had entered the third phase and would soon start to rampage. With his area attack, there won't be a single stone left standing here. That's why it will be difficult to find the van, as well as the longsword they brought. So the main character is going to kill Quaisha, but for this he needs the longsword of the Carisian dragon. The guy eventually returns it right after defeating the monster. George shouted if he thinks he has enough strength to take down a whole dragon. Of course, he helped them twice, but that doesn't mean they'll trust him. Does the guy even know what condition the sword is in? The girl said that it was impossible, and the hero realized that everything was bad at this rate and the sword would be lost to him forever. Lucy said that removing the seal on the van requires a huge amount of mana, and because of the robber's poison, they can't absorb mana. The comrade turned to her and asked what she was doing, but Jason noticed that they hadn't told him about this problem before. Then he smiled and said that his nickname was Mononos. One of his skills was infinite mana regeneration. Soon, the girl's body was filled with a huge amount of power, and she thought that it was impossible because the mana was arriving. Therefore, she could use her magic quite easily, and soon the seal was removed. The hero thanked him for everything and said that he would keep his promise and return the sword. George asked why his partner did this. And what if he decides to do something bad? Lucy answered that everything is fine. Not long ago, he tied up the king bear, but did not kill him. The partner asked if that was really the only reason she believed him and could lie at least for the sake of decency. The hero walked quickly enough to the van and opened its back door. When he looked inside, he was very happy and thought that the long sword of the Carisian dragon was finally in his hands. Suddenly, the captain of the robbers appeared behind him and said that the operation had almost failed, but he was glad that he had decided to see how it all ended. The heroes didn't understand what the hell was going on, but the man from behind rushed at him with a weapon. Since the distance was very close, Jason did not react and was soon pierced. Roger, as well as the others, were surprised by the scalded and killed. The guards also noticed what had happened and understood that this man was a scoundrel and that he remained alive. The enemy captain immediately landed in the van and prepared to steal his weapon. He even said that who would have thought that the ball would come to him in such a way? At that very second, the system reported that due to the death of the owner, the web of the great spider was breaking. That's why the van, which had been on the web all this time, immediately began to fall down. And when he fell, he began to slowly sink into the water deeper and deeper. Jason appeared behind the robber and said that he had the same feeling, because he didn't think he would get to the sword this way. After that, the guy used the weapon and immediately stabbed the man in front. At the same time, he said that he returns all the good and evil that is done to him in double amount. After this, the hero pulled out his weapon and the man in front of him fell, bleeding. Then he began to laugh and said that the enemy captain was wrong to covet his prey. And finally, the sword of the Carisian dragon, which he had dreamed about so much, became his. The first thing the system asked was whether to copy the dragon's longsword. The hero shouted, of course, "This must be done," and immediately pressed the button. But at that moment, the system reported that due to the user level not matching the required object level, copying was impossible. The guy was horrified and didn't understand what was happening. To use a longsword, you needed to be level 30 or higher, and his level had long since exceeded 50. Then he said that this weapon should not anger him, and behind him he heard a voice that it seemed he had lost. It has nothing personal, but the honor of the killer of people of the Bloody Tower is at stake. After these words, he struck his opponent. The hero's body immediately fell to the ground without strength after this strong blow. The enemy captain went on to say that if it weren't for his healing skill, he would have died long ago. After that, he approached the guy and said that he would give him back his own words. Because he quickly forgets the good, one guide returns in triple size and let him in turn accept death from his blade. And after that, he will never see the dawn again. The hero felt a strong pain from the weapon that was in his back, and he understood that it was with such difficulty that he got here. Suddenly, the system reported that the Carsian dragon's longsword had merged with the user. Next came the copying and also the absorption of the characteristics of this weapon, which were powerful for the dragon. The main character was still conscious at that moment and saw the absorption but did not understand what was happening. Further in front of me in the system window, I saw that there was copying, as well as absorption of the level of the longsword. And after that, copy followed, as well as absorbing the weapon's passive skill. And after that, the defense was increased by 35%. And then there was copy and absorb the first unique weapon skill, and it was called vampirism. Next is the absorption of the second unique skill of the dragon sword called berserk. Very soon, all the characteristics of this weapon were completely absorbed. The system reported that the user's health level has decreased by 25%, activating the Carsian dragon longsword user defense mode. The second unique skill of this weapon, called berserker, is automatically activated. Copying the second unique skill of the berserker longsword has been inserted. The Rainbow Bridge dungeon boss was screaming angrily at this time and preparing to attack. Ricardo noted that everything was bad because he was now going to hit the square and things were bad. The dragon was already in the final stages of releasing its attack. Suddenly, she saw something appear below where the van with weapons was. And literally in a few moments, the creature, which was of enormous size, was cut into two parts. Elizabeth, along with the other high-octane hunter, were shocked by this. At that very moment, the system reported that the dungeon boss had been destroyed and the breach had been sealed. Soon, everyone was already in the Hunters Association in Japan. Today, at 16 o'clock, as a result of the Rainbow Bridge dungeon breakthrough, many civilians were injured. It also suffered irreparable damage, but thanks to the prompt actions of the Hunters Association and the Guild, the situation stabilized within 2 hours. However, some are concerned that the association is not monitoring the dungeon well, and the man told the others that they should not make such faces. This time they managed to deal with Quasha quite successfully. This was said by Georg Tokuo, tank class, martial arts master of level 570, the #1 guild master of Midas guild number 1 in Simon Country, who was a level 701 sword master, told the association president that they had sealed a breach 3 months ago. Dalton, the guild master of the Taiken Guild, a healer class with a level of 610, said that sealing does not guarantee that the dungeon will not be disarmed again. The guy asked if this was how the dungeon needed to be looked after, so that in such a short time, when the situation was resolved, it would require an official review of the ownership. Elizabeth sat sadly and thought, wondering if Mr. Jason had been able to escape. Simon slammed the table hard and said he was only interested in one thing. Usually it takes at least half a year for the boss to be revived. But doesn't that mean that Ms. Elizabeth didn't finish off Quasha last time? He continued to look closely at the girl and their gazes met. At that moment she got angry and after that she touched the table. Then the others saw her using her power and didn't understand what was happening. Soon the pressure on the table became so strong that it began to collapse. Therefore, in a moment it was destroyed, and the remains flew in different directions. Ricardo sat quietly, protecting himself from them with an aura. The man asked the lady what she was doing. It was unclear what this farce was all about. Simon also became very angry after seeing this, and had already prepared his power to attack. Suddenly, he heard how they addressed him politely, calling him Sir. Georg approached him and asked for forgiveness for the disrespectful behavior of their employee, and he apologizes on her behalf. The interlocutor became indignant and said that she had completely lost her fear. If she continued to get into trouble like this, she swears that she will soon die. The girl only became even more indignant when she heard these words. Then she stood up and said, as they say, it is better to see once than hear 100 times, and if they had not gotten it by now, she showed the shockwave the reward for killing Quaishi. Mr. Ricardo, who made the biggest contribution to their recent confrontation, will not let you lie. He noticed that he was too busy and hadn't checked the reward yet, but he didn't think she was lying. And at the time, he didn't understand why she had dragged him into this. Georg noted that everything was clear. That is, it was only thanks to Mr. Ricardo that everything ended with little bloodshed. After these words, everyone started applauding and thanking him for the work he had done, but he asked them not to do this. Then he noticed the girl and wondered if this was really true. She, in turn, smiled slyly, and it was clear that she was content with this situation. The man thought that the scoundrel was harboring a grudge because he had interfered. So, the girl will still pay for it because he will not forgive such humiliation. And also that scoundrel who stole Quisha from him, he will definitely find him. Elizabeth said that she would take responsibility for finding out the reason for the underground breakthrough, and would also seek to hold the guild accountable for the delay. Those present immediately lowered their heads, because they understood that reinforcements had been arriving for a long time. The girl said that it seemed that all the questions for her had been exhausted, and with that, let them take their leave. Then the door opened and George appeared, who said that everything was fine and the meeting was not over yet. He came on behalf of the International Association and Hunters, and he has important information that needs to be conveyed to everyone present. Due to the recent dungeon breakthrough, the world's only Coresian dragon longsword was stolen, an incident that occurred during transportation. When the sword was on its way to an exhibition in Japan, and everyone was asked to take an active part in the search, there was an official letter asking for assistance from the International Association. Simon noted that when the van was attacked, he heard that they had removed the seal from it themselves. Lucy noted that this was due to a request for assistance from the hunter Roger, who was a member of the Taiken Guild, and hunter Jason from the Japanese Hunters Association. George, as well as Elizabeth, were very surprised when they heard such information. In addition to all this, even Ricardo, who took note of the information, was very surprised. Dalton noted that Roger was indeed one of her people, but things were not that simple. And Georg looked at his device and said that there was no hunter named Jason Haruto in the Japanese Association. Elizabeth realized that the situation was going badly, because it was she who took him on the mission. The man looked at her and realized that here was his chance to take revenge. So he asked to wait. Did they really mean the one who tied the Bear King with a web? They had some minor disagreements on the spot, but he was amazed because it seemed to him that he was from the association. So he asks Mrs. Elizabeth what to understand by this, since it seems she knows him. So they asked if it was he who stole the longsword of the Coresian dragon. At the same time, the man took this weapon into his own hands. But it was not the main character, but Michael Takumi, the leader of the Dark Guild Blood Tower with level 301. He said that this is the same legendary blade, and just took it in his hands. The level will increase by 200. The runes that are on the handle help to recognize the owner. The billions spent on organizing the breakthrough of this dungeon stood, and it is amazing. The subordinates were stunned and wondered if it was really true that the leader had actually made a breakthrough. The leader said that this man had lost all his fighters and would like to explain this. He immediately bowed down and asked for forgiveness because some strange man had followed them, but there was no need to worry because he was probably dead. The man covered his mouth for a few moments and then said that everything was clear and it was a good job. It turns out that the troops no longer need the money, so their share will belong to him. This is his reward, and now he can recount it. The guy thanked the master and said that now the task could be considered completed. But Michael said that all this was not true, because he failed it. The interlocutor asked what it all meant. The leader asked who would sell the world's only legendary sword for only 10 billion, since he had taken on this task to obtain information about it. The subordinate said to wait a second, because their guild's failure in the mission meant death. Then the master came into play. He is simply a scoundrel because he planned to kill him from the very beginning. Michael used his power and said that it was nothing personal, but he didn't need witnesses, and also hoped that Karen was accepting yen. The glass that was behind the man cracked a few moments later, and very soon a subordinate appeared on it, who was killed. Michael's next action was to cut the man into several pieces. The system reported that the weapon's durability had decreased by 2, and there were 8 left. The man remarked that it would be quite a shame if it broke before he had time to fix it. The main character remembered the words of the man who told him to remember, because this is his gift to him. Immediately after this, he immediately woke up and began to scream quite loudly. And the timer that was built into his neck was glowing, and he could feel it. Then he touched the very mark that was on his neck and said that everything was bad. Sand, honest words did their job. Roger called him elder and said that he woke up, but he thought that he would never come to his senses. The guy did not understand why this was happening and asked him to stop. The interlocutor said that this is not so. After he was wounded from the sea, a blinding column of light burst out very bright. The man asked if he would really be in the center of the Rainbow Bridge dungeon breakthrough. The guy replied that it was true, they were there with him, and everyone with the elder. The hero rose from his seat, and the interlocutors continued their conversation. So he went in some other direction and said that his head was spinning from his energy. The man noticed that it was this man who saved his life. Jason asked what he meant and how it happened. The man replied that he considered it his duty. And this little fellow raised everyone's ears, Taiken, and also the association they had to have a sweet one. Eventually, he was found on the coast. The hero wondered if some dungeon controller had forced the guild and association to move. The head of Tychon is Dalton Sonoda, and this guy is Roger Sonoda, so aren't they related? The guy couldn't believe his own thoughts and thought that it was nonsense, because they weren't in some movie. The conversation continued in the office of the chairman of the hunting association. Elizabeth said that she understood everything. Does it mean that the hunter Jason died after all? The man answered that it was so. He saw his death with his own eyes. But now it seemed to him that the girl was not surprised at all. It was unclear what this strange reaction was. The interviewee noted that work for hunters always carries risks. The man was surprised again, and Georg said that he had seen their official letter asking for cooperation. Their participation in this matter as the Japanese Hunters Association is confirmed, so they will do everything possible to help in the search for the legendary sword. Lucy noted that in that case, let them provide several high-level ones to the hunter, because they know where this sword is. The interlocutor said that he, of course, expected something like this, but had they already established his location, this is magic for tracking the opposition. In response, I heard that this sword is not a personal item, but it has runes engraved on it that allow one to assess the owner's level. She can feel this engraving and track it. About an hour ago, someone used it again. Elizabeth thought that they were not told that the engraving could be felt, and also to track, and that's why Jason was given permission to use it. The girl said before it was stolen, it had a durability of about 10. But someone used it, and its strength decreased. The interlocutor said that soon it turns out, it will disappear. It was the only clue to find her mother. It was the woman who went missing during this incident 15 years ago. Lucy asked how she knew. Elizabeth replied that they were not fools either. They knew that the stolen longsword was her mother's heirloom. The girl immediately stood up when she heard such information. She then bowed down and asked Mistress Elizabeth to help her return her mother's relic. When the conversations ended, the girl walked down the corridor and thought that Lucy, as well as George, were hiding something. And the story with Mr. Jason also raises suspicion, because she didn't think that he would die in this incident. Her thoughts were interrupted by a man who addressed her. It was Dalton who asked if something had upset her, or if something had happened. She replied that everything was fine, and if he had any business with her. The guild leader asked why she didn't return to Tychon again. The girl exhaled sadly and said that the dungeon was getting bigger. And the big guilds, instead of protecting them, play capitalism. All they care about is damn profit and the value of shares on the stock exchange. If it turns out that the breakthrough that occurred was the result of negligence on the part of the Tychon Guild, they will be in serious trouble. This is precisely why she does not want to return to the association. There are many things that require his attention, and she also called this man her father. The man smiled and said that he actually wanted to talk to her about something else, and again said too much. Before the next trip, he asked her to stop by the central hospital for hunters, and the main character was actually on the roof of this central hospital. Then I called up the status windows to see the statistics, the health and mana levels, as well as the basic defense were increased, as well as the skill and class levels. Although the guy failed to copy the Carishian Dragon Blade, he seemed to have managed to absorb all of its positive characteristics. Even if he stole it, it was unknown how he would have been able to hunt with it without arousing suspicion, so it would have been even better if the rage had been activated in time. Fury is the second unique skill of the sword, doubles all stats, and the user's level, lasts for 1 minute, and has a recharge time of 1 day. The activation conditions are activated automatically when the user's health drops below 25%. Right before his death, the guy turned into a berserker. It was incredibly painful, but thanks to this, it was possible to tear apart Quasha, whose level exceeded 400. Soon the system reported that the monster was killed, and a reward for its destruction was received, and the system also absorbed the shock war by copying. The copy skill has been improved. Quasha's shockwave has been absorbed and turned into the internal vibration skill. The shockwave was also absorbed into the insertion skill and turned into internal vibrations. The web of the great spider drips water level 2. So when using the web, a unique wave and lifesteal are activated at the same time. While all this was happening, the main character continued to drown in the water, sinking lower and lower. Jason thought that the copy skill had evolved and now you can absorb it and even merge abilities, so that's just awesome. He just tried using the internal vibration skill and it was really cool. And besides, he was now at level 276. In the end, all that was left for him to do was find the one who wounded him and get the legendary weapon. Suddenly, he heard a voice that was asking why she was beating him. The guy didn't understand what happened. It interested him. It was Elizabeth who said that she told you that if there was danger, immediately put it down and run. Jason realized that this was what he thought, that she could be so harsh. I wonder who was so unlucky, and what did she need in this hospital? Roger called her little sister and said that it was her own fault that she couldn't seal the dungeon completely. She asked if he was really a fool. The hero was horrified and thought, what kind of sister, although it is true because they are both synods. Then I remembered my interlocutor, who said that they raised the guild and the association, so they had a hard time. The guy thought it was just a coincidence, but could they really be brother and sister? The girl asked if Mr. Jason was also okay, and it was unclear where he was now. The interlocutor noted that he did not know this. The hero realized that they were looking for him. But did they really find out that he pretended to be an association hunter in order to steal weapons? Everything is bad because he can't be found, in which case, first he must get to the legendary blade. And when he already wanted to run away from this place, he bumped his nose into some person. It turned out that it was George who said that he had survived after all. Then he looked at the boy quite angrily and called him a thief of legendary swords. The guy was stunned when he saw this man and realized that he was caught. Without any hesitation, the man grabbed him by the clothes and called him a scoundrel. After that, he hit the wall quite hard and told him to tell him where the sword was because if he didn't tell him, he would slam it into the wall. Jason was trying to say that he waited a second because this is turning out to be a misunderstanding. The guard asked what other misunderstanding had killed him, but now he looked quite healthy. So was he really in cahoots with those people? And the main character realized that the situation was similar to the fact that he didn't want to listen to him at all, and things were bad. George immediately used his power and drew his sword. Then, Lucy shouted at him why he took out a weapon in the hospital. The interlocutor told her some regime mother, because he was not going to use the skill. It's just that, if he doesn't force this liar to come true, then he won't be able to calm down. The protagonist thought that he didn't want to resort to this at all, but nothing could be done, and the ability of internal vibration was activated. The blade was already heading towards the guy, and he also reached out to it with his hand. But before the blades even had time to touch it, it began to fall apart. George saw what happened, and it was clear that his weapon was destroyed. Roger and Elizabeth also came up and were surprised. The girl carefully studied what happened and came up with the idea that it was really Quashi's shockwave, but it was unclear where it came from for Jason. Moreover, it was completely unclear why his aura had changed so much. It was very loud on the stage of the concert hall, and a fairly popular band was performing there. The group consisted of girls who moved energetically on stage. The crowd cheered when they heard their songs, and soon the end of the concert came. Sarah got into the car, and she was a member of the idol group IF. There she said goodbye to the other girls and said that they had done a great job. Immediately after that, she started the engine of her car and sped away from there. One of the girls asked if Sarah's parents were really rich, and her interlocutor remarked that how else could she explain that she drives such a car? Another participant said that it was really cool, and she also wanted to drive such a sports car. When the girl had almost left the parking lot, she saw another car in front of her. Because of this, she stopped quite abruptly, because an accident almost happened. But, fortunately, she managed to do it and the collision was avoided. Enraged, Sarah opened the window and shouted, "Who taught this scoundrel to drive?" At that moment, the driver opened the door and slowly began to get out of the car. It turned out that it was the leader of the Bloody Night Guild, Michael. The interlocutor paid attention to him and realized who he was. But the man came closer to her car and threw a case with the legendary weapon inside. Then the person involved came up and asked if the filming had already finished. If this is so, then does she want to accidentally go down into the dungeon? At the same time, if of course she wants everything to remain as it was before. The protagonist and the steel arrived at the place where the long sword of the Coresian dragon was used. After examining, Elizabeth stated that there were no traces left. Lucy added that it seemed they were too late. The hunter said, which means they can only wait until the sword is used again. After these words, there was an awkward pause, and the girls began to think about it. Suddenly, the hero drew attention to himself and said that there was a bloody tower. It happened at the moment when the villain tried to kill him. He said that it was from the Bloody Tower Guild. The girl said that she had never heard of such a guild, and that it was probably one of the dark ones. Jason said he understood, and even he didn't know about it. George noted that if they waited for the next use, the sword might break. Elizabeth shouted that there was no need, because they had a lead, and now they would work on it. And she, in turn, knew a person who would help them. It was exactly 15 years ago that that terrible catastrophe happened, which took many lives. And it was at this very time that a certain being gave the girl this power. At first she thought she had awakened as a hunter, but it was a completely different ability. The skill that the system suggested the girls use could return the object to its original state. Her skill is a combination of keys on the computer that allows you to return everything to its original state. This ability could be exchanged for both people and objects. So she bought broken or discarded expensive things, restored them to their original condition, and sold them. Although it could not be called a healing or restorative ability, it made money by returning people and their body parts to their original state. As a result, it turns out that his ability was limited. But she needed money, and in huge quantities her parents suffered during the Great Disaster and the currency crisis. The baby tried to return them to their previous state, but to use this ability, mana was needed. Without it, she only rolled back objects and light wounds. Mana is something like energy and is only available to hunters. Then the girl, risking her life, went into the dungeon to get mana there. She did it as a porter. But sometimes it happened that she healed wounds, and therefore she was a healer. For an ordinary person who was not a hunter, going into a dungeon was as dangerous as entering a lion's cage without a weapon. But the funny thing is that the biggest damage she suffered was from the disdain of her fellow party members. They asked if she really wanted mana. Was she some kind of beggar? Of course, there were more terrible moments when the girl lost her comrades. She felt like this ability was nothing but trouble, so she wanted to give it all up. Suddenly, a man approached her and remarked that all this was interesting. Not only does she beg for mana like a homeless person, but she also starts stealing, which is when she meets Michael Kurosaki. The man said that her house was so empty and it was unclear what she was spending her money on. Does Sarah from a popular Japanese group really live like a hermit, 3 meals a day, fast food delivery, and who would have thought that an idol could afford such a thing? He smiled and said again that her life was a success. Everyone else was trying their best and also going on diets. But Sarah doesn't care how much she eats, because she can return everything to its previous state. But he immediately understood what kind of person she was when he met her that very day. A man was dying in front of her, and she was robbing him. Therefore, he can say that they are of the same feather. Of course, girls, I didn't like all these statements at all. The man said that he would make it clear right away that if their agreement continued, he didn't care what she did, even if it concerned her work as an idol. The girl got tired of listening to him and hit the table, asking what this time. She doesn't understand why she should go into the dungeon. Let him save up mana as usual and give it to her. Michael said he needed her help to return one trinket to its original state. Well, that would require a huge amount of mana. But here, he will not be able to get her in any way. He swears that this will be the last time she will have to go down into the dungeon. The woman asked if he was serious, and the man replied that it was true, because he had promised her. Sarah asked if maybe he found an item with infinite mana regeneration and it was in that dungeon. Michael replied that this was not true, and the girl then asked what he was talking about. Michael replied that if she went with him, he might show up, knowing that they had an agreement not to go into the dungeons. But if she goes down with him, then yes, he promises to compensate her for everything. The hero was in the Belgium of the future, and noticed that if they were talking about an informant, could it really be Mr. Ricardo? This is the head of that very guild who constantly complains that everyone around him is bothering him. The girl replied that everything is correct. The guy asked, but wouldn't it be better to contact the largest guilds Midas or Tychon for information? Elizabeth said that perhaps so, in terms of information about the dungeons and in manifestations they occupy a leading position in the world. Both she and the entire association admit this. But his thirst for clearing the dungeon and higher than anyone else had was now directed towards the head of the guild of the future Ricardo. The girl asked if he was talking about the heart of a giant golem. The interlocutor noted that it is correct that it is also called an item of infinite mana regeneration. Elizabeth said that this is a rare reward item that appears when you defeat the boss of the secret dungeon Snow Mountain Walk. Ricardo said that everything was correct. He did not lie about the information to find the heart of the giant golem. It was after this that they came across the very same Bloody Tower guild that Mr. Jason had told them about. They didn't even know about their existence. But now it is known that they were secretly recruiting a team to explore the Snow Mountain of Golems. That is all they have managed to find out so far. But they turned out to be much more dangerous than they had previously assumed. We are talking about the murder of high-ranking people, as well as the slaughter of entire groups in the dungeons. Also theft of items, and they are ruthless and ready to do anything to achieve their goals. This is a dark guild. The hero realized that he personally did not need this item of infinite mana regeneration. But, of course, it was an amazing artifact. Anyone would want to get it. But how is the heart connected to the legendary sword, or was it stolen just to defeat this golem, although this blade is already on its last legs? Is it possible that getting the heart for the Bloody Tower is more important than the sword itself, even though it all sounds like some kind of nonsense? Elizabeth said that the Bloody Tower Guild found a giant golem and therefore are gathering a raid into this dungeon. Lucy said she didn't think that was the case at all. 15 years have passed since the discovery of this secret dungeon, and he has not appeared once. Jason approached her and asked where she got such information. The girl noted that she could not tell all the details. She, in turn, has long been interested in this dungeon and has been studying it. In any case, the Snowy Mountain is known to the Ghoul for being difficult to pass. And among hunters, this dungeon ranks first among those they would rather avoid, with sporadic groups going out to search for secret dungeons. But most of them ignore him, Ricardo said. Could it be that these hired killers have teamed up to clear the dungeon? Even if it's not a secret dungeon, there's definitely something valuable there, the hero asked. But when they leave, the man replied that he doesn't know. The push has already ended, so it's unclear. The hero thought, as he thought, this was planned even before they stole the sword of the Corisian dragon. Elizabeth noted that in that case they should move there slowly. Then she turned to Mr. Ricardo and he looked at her. The interlocutor asked if she understood correctly that he already had a team ready to nominate her. He noted why he would do this. The girl said that she believed that the Guild of the Future always kept a team on standby, comparable to those of the association. The chief told the lady that she understood that information about secret lands was not always accurate. There were good reasons why no one wanted to go there. It's about terrible natural conditions as well as lords of annoying golems. On the Snowy Mountain of Golems live stone golems of level 40. The attack is weak on many of them. If the core is not destroyed, they will be endlessly restored. Ricardo, along with the rest of his group and those who came to him, headed for this mountain. On the way of the entire large group there were many of those same golems. Hunters tried to destroy them with their weapons. But the limbs, as well as all other parts of these monsters, quickly recovered. That's why the monsters continued to attack until the core was destroyed. The guild leader shouted that he had warned them that they would immediately recover, and that they should quickly destroy the core, not giving it time to recover. So, using his power, he killed the creatures that were fighting these people. Eventually, they began to gather into a single ball, attracting each other. Then the man used his dark magic and an explosion occurred. With a smile on his face, he turned to the others and said that you first destroyed all the cores, developed golems, will destroy them one after another. So those who followed him and his subordinates, destroying the cores, said that it really was easier this way. Jason said he didn't want to come here so much, but now he seems to like it even though he's still cool, even if he's a cheapskate. Lucy said that once they entered the Snowy Golem Mountains dungeon, they needed to destroy as many of these golems as possible. The hero noticed, so they should get involved in any fight. And this is some special condition, the girl answered. That's right. This is one of the conditions for the appearance of the intermediate boss. During the investigation, it was discovered that this dungeon was an induction dungeon. Jason asked what kind of induction dungeon this was. Ricciardo said that's why he said it would be a bit difficult because it means there are hidden areas there. Dungeons are usually divided into zones. If a hunter knows the route of a normal dungeon, he can quickly get to the final boss area. New inductive dungeons must be completed in seasons in order. If they fail to pass one zone, the rest simply will not appear. Lucy said it was just a guess, probably 15 years ago due to some mistake this dungeon could not be passed. Because of this, the secret zone did not appear, the hero noticed. That is, in order for the intermediate boss to appear, you need to defeat many golems. The girl said that she didn't know how to reset the dungeon, so they had no other choice but to stick to the conditions and move forward. In addition, you need to defeat him as quickly as possible. If the reward for killing the intermediate boss is the key to the second zone, then it is for him that the Bloody Tower came. They must definitely get this key before others. The rest fought with the main character, and he thought that he didn't care what they had planned, but the main thing was to return the legendary sword. Next, he turned to the insertion skill and used the Great Spider's Web. Naturally, after this attack the golem was tied up, the system reported that when using the giant spider's web, internal vibrations are activated. It was because of this that, after the binding, the monster was immediately killed by destruction. Someone asked, "This is a reward for defeating the great spider, that is, the web of a giant spider." The interlocutor replied that he thought so, but could this useless object really be used like this? Lucy also did not stand aside and used her freezing attacks on the creatures. After she stopped them, she immediately shouted to her partner, and he understood what he had to do. Therefore, he immediately rushed into the attack and began to crush the cores of all these golems. On the other hand, the rest of the group members were fighting the large creature. The guy shouted that he was going to strike hard, and his comrade said that they should retreat. But it was already too late, and the huge monster easily hit them with its attack. After this, Elizabeth arrived to help her comrades in arms. She stopped next to him and prepared to use her magic. So she touched the creature with her palm, and the system reported that the Quaishi shockwave had been used. When this happened, the monster began to gradually collapse from the core to all other parts. The girl asked these people if everything was okay with them. They answered that everything was fine, and thanked her, and thanked her. Suddenly, she noticed a boy who was trying to hide from her. So I came closer and shouted for him to stop right now. Then she took off her hood and shouted that it was Roger, and it was unclear what the hell he was doing here. The brother asked what was wrong with that, since he came as an official member of Jason's group. The girl asked what other member of the group was older, but the interlocutor replied that it was always like that. Before that, he asked if they were really going to go into the dungeon, because he also wanted this. The hero looked at this and thought that it was a pathetic sight. Roger noticed with his friend that he would get lost again on the bridge. What would he do then? Because he definitely needed a guide, because he had spelling idiocy. The hero told him to cover his mouth because he would not be alone there. Although he agreed and said, "Go together," the comrade asked if this was true. Jason replied, "That's right." But only as a member of his group, the other person said, "Of course, he agrees to that." The guy also had a request that only this person could fulfill, the girl said. I wonder what Mr. Jason has in mind. After all, he is also low-level, Brother Red, so that she would timidly mock him, because the boy saw with his own eyes who cut down Quisha, and it was Jason. Elizabeth realized that if she thought about it, he seemed to have grown a lot since their first meeting. Besides, this skill that he is using now is quite strange, and he is definitely the shockwave of that very boss. And his brother also seems to be not lying, but it is unclear how he managed all this. And where does so much power come from? Michael walked along with his partner and told her to look at how these bees work for the benefit of the hive. After all, they are trying their best to win. The man watched how the main character fought, as well as the rest of the group members. That's why he said that neither disguising himself with team members using the concealment skill reaps the benefits. But even if they use concealment with the hunter region, there are high-level ones, so it might feel like they will be discovered. However, people like them are not afraid of anything during a fight. They hardly use detection skills. As for them, they do not know who fate will bring them into conflict with. Therefore, their stealth skills and use of hidden weapons at the highest level will not catch them so easily. The main thing is to act skillfully, and this is the motto of the Bloody Tower Guild. Then I asked my friend if the mana was being collected normally. The girl didn't answer, and continued her actions. Michael said that this bath battery is quite expensive, and it holds hundreds of destroyed small monsters in mana. 10 of these accumulators were able to reopen the rift in the Rainbow Dungeon. Sarah asked how many would be needed to return the legendary to its original state. And the main thing he noticed is that it will probably take twice as much. The girl said that he wants to roll back the stolen legendary item and defeat the boss of the hidden dungeon. Michael said, "Almost everyone says so. There is a powerful barrier in this area. The only thing that can cut it is this long sword of the Carizian dragon." Sarah asked where he got this information from, and the interlocutor said not to ask too many questions. Let her just roll things away when he asked her to, and the less you know, the better you sleep. She noticed that she was just nervous, because she hadn't gone down into the subway for a long time. But he, in turn, continues to fool various people. After that, she looked at him and said that she didn't care. As long as their agreement was in effect, she didn't care what Mr. Michael was doing. She thought that if she could obtain an item of infinite creation, she would be able to bring her parents back to life. The hero continued the battle and said that he had already killed 200 boulders, but there was still no end to them. There was snow all around, and he was sweating like a horse. The core of another creature just flew into his hand. The hero caught it and said that it was strange. This crystal was different from the others, just in case he would copy it before breaking it. Then it was not clear to him what was actually happening, because he himself had gone into the ground. Suddenly, Ricardo came up and said that it had already started. Jason asked what he was talking about and what had started. The man replied that they had fulfilled the conditions for moving on to the next zone. This is precisely why the intermediate boss of the location will appear right now. And we are talking about none other than a migrating golem. In fact, a huge monster maneuvering golem appeared from the snow, which was the intermediate boss of the Snow Golem Mountain, with a level of 150. After appearing, the creature didn't hesitate for a second and immediately rushed to attack. The people who were the first to be hit said it was too big, and the guild leader used his power and shouted that you all step back. Then the guys asked what had happened. Had they really already killed him? And the interlocutor noticed that he had gotten a little scared. But the core was still not destroyed, so the monster began to come together. The hunters saw this and realized that everything would not be so simple. Ricciardo also looked at what was happening and prepared for the ensuing battle. The monster had already fully recovered and was ready for further collision. The man then used his dark magic to destroy it again. The creature disintegrated into small pieces, but soon began to come back together because the core was not destroyed. Ricciardo was angry when he saw what had happened and shouted that it was the hated cannonball. The hero watched what happened and decided that now it was necessary to tie the core with the web of the great spider. So the system reported that the web of the great spider was used. The core at that moment began to be bound by the web. But even despite all attempts to tie it up, the creature continued to recover. So in a few moments, the hero stood next to a huge monster who was ready to fight. Jason realized that everything was bad, because this creature didn't care at all about this web. Something had to be done before he merged with the rest of the golems. Suddenly, they shouted at him to get back. The boy looked over and saw Elizabeth use her power and attack the monster. After that, it began to glow blue and fall apart. When the girl saw what happened, she said that striking attacks were useless, so it was necessary to deal damage to all of its fragments at once. Ricardo was indignant and said that he knew this, so he shouldn't be smart. That's why he was looking for another way. Because if they don't come up with something, they'll have to melt down all the remaining debris here. Otherwise, it will never end. The hero understood. This is it. And this is where the power of the migrating golem lies. Lucy said earlier that this dungeon is the most difficult part of this migrating golem. That is, an intermediate boss. And this dungeon is inductive. In order for the next zone to appear, you need to clear the previous one. The new zone always interacts with the old one, adapting to their battle results. Killed golems will appear migrating, which will collect the remains of the monsters killed by them. The man said, in other words, all the stone that they defeat will then gather into one stone mage. This hits the morale hard, and usually the group runs away or dies, essentially migrating in strength comparable to the final boss of a normal dungeon, Elizabeth said, in which case there are only two ways to win. The first of them is to destroy its core. And the second way she meant was to melt all the remains of the golems, which is exactly what she was doing now. This required a fairly large supply and consumption of mana, so she was already breathing heavily. But even despite this, that same huge monster had already begun to appear behind Elizabeth. She turned her attention there and wondered when he had managed to end up behind. Then she immediately turned towards him and used Hellfire. The hero realized that everything was bad, because if he used the abilities of the longsword, Lucy would immediately notice it. It is precisely in this way that it will not be possible to destroy the core, although you should wait, because he has another folk item, so the guy immediately went to the inventory. From there, I got the Dig of the Bear King, which has the properties of an indomitable beast. The first skill can hold any object for a certain time, but the second one penetrates any object and also causes damage. The hero realized that this was a completely different matter, so he copied and absorbed the Claw of the Bear Kings. The system reported that the first skill is absorbed, and when used with the web of the great spider, it will inflict a powerful stupor. And the second skill is absorbed by the insert and penetrates the target, and also absorbs 15% of life and attack. The main character saw these statistics and realized that everything was fine and that he just needed it to work. Elizabeth remained right next to the monster, which continued to burn with fire. George asked if she was really going to melt all the golem's remains. Lucy realized no matter how strong she was, if she continued like this, her mana would run out. The huge monster, in turn, continued its attempts to recover. Of course, the girl saw perfectly well what was happening and used her Hellfire. So the restored golem continued to burn with fire again. Another attempt to set the creature on fire did not work, and so the migrating golem immediately rushed to attack. The hero realized that the Hellfire was not working, so had she already run out of mana. At the same time, the web began to envelop the monster. Very soon, the creature turned into a huge cocoon, and the main character stood next to it. The girl asked in surprise if he had really done all this. Ricardo was also stunned, and wondered if the web of the great spider could really do this. The thoughts were interrupted by a guy who asked the leader to hit him again. The man asked what he wanted, because he saw that the attack did not help. Then the hero said that in that case he would catch the core. Right now they don't have any time at all, so he asks him to do it. Of course, Ricardo didn't want to do this, and gritting his teeth, he realized that he had no choice. So he said this time he would believe him as such a commander, because it would be a sin to refuse him. So after a few moments, the powerful dark magic of this man rushed towards the golem. It in turn flew apart into pieces, and only the core remained intact and safe. When Jason saw him, he immediately took advantage of the grate and used the web of the great spider. That same web looked different from what had been previously thought of, as if it had spikes. So they were heading in large numbers towards the core of his acute force. The hero saw what happened and realized that it was right to prevent the core from coming into contact with the remains. Ricardo was very surprised and shouted, "Did he really catch the cannonball? Was it with that useless reward item? Was he sleeping?" Elizabeth realized that even if he had become stronger, she still couldn't believe that this was even possible. If she thought about it, then in the dungeon of the Great Spider, you yourself happened. When she saw a guy there, he said that only he and his friend had survived. He also soon tried with all his might to ask to be allowed to join her. So, even in the fight with Quasia, this man also came to the forefront. At those most crucial moments, Mr. Jason was always there. Lucy noticed that this was the same one used by the Bear King, and it was definitely his style. The other hunters began to joyfully rejoice that this man had caught the core. If they had known that it was possible to do so, they would have killed the Great Spider long ago. Michael, who was on the slope and watching what was happening, was surprised. He absolutely could not believe what he saw with his own eyes. Sarah asked what was going on. Was he sealing the core in the web, since it was unclear how that happened at all? The man said that the mana collection is cancelled, they are changing the plan and starting the operation, everyone take your positions. The subordinates said that they understood everything and immediately rushed in the direction of the position. The girl asked what had happened. Was the situation really so serious that they wanted to intervene personally? The leader said that because of that strange person, it would be a little more difficult to get the key to the core. So he told Sarah to prepare well. The girl, in turn, stood next to a huge number of containers with mana. Roger looked out from behind the tree and didn't understand what to do because it looked like the main guy had gone somewhere. And it's not clear why this girl is collecting mana. He should probably tell the elder about the atoms. Earlier, the hero told him to take this thing. This item allows you to use a fairly high level of camouflage. The ally asked if he was sure that it does this. Because this is an expensive thing, Jason said it was, so he will have to do one very important job. The subordinate will have a key role in this mission, and he will need to follow the Bloody Tower once they find the hidden dungeon. Let him report immediately. They, in turn, will steal their plan and also carry it out. The guy thought that everything was right. On the other side was his sister and Master Ricardo, and most importantly, the elder. The hero asked if he really wanted to destroy it. The man replied that he had caught it, so it was his reward. The girl replied that it was a true observation. Jason said that if no one was against it, then he would do it. There was an unusual feeling in his soul when he was treated not like trash. This is the core, the guy has already copied it so you can safely destroy it. He touched it with his weapon, and after a few moments the core disintegrated into pieces and the system reported that the migrating golem was defeated. Following this, the system began to report that the level had increased several dozen times. The main character also received a reward for destroying the core of the migrating golem. This reward was the sealed heart key, which can be used to open a hidden door where the giant golem's heart is sealed. That same key Jason immediately materialized in his hand. Then he joyfully raised it up and said that he had received the key to the hidden area. George said they couldn't believe their eyes at being one step closer to solving the mystery, and Lucy said there was no point in skinning a bear before it was killed. The main character saw how happy everyone was and was a little surprised by it. Then he turned to the system window and called up a status check, where it was clear that his statistics had increased. With the effect of the sword, he was already at level 285. Just a little more and he will reach 300, and then he will finally be able to swing alone. Ricardo noticed how the guy was happy for some unknown reason. He went on to say that this man was so happy about the victory, although he was only an intermediate boss. The girl noted that he had made them both sweat. The guild leader said that he didn't even break a sweat and was excited. And suddenly his speech was interrupted by some strange sound and stones from the side. Everyone else also saw what was happening and immediately became very wary. Some pillars with sharp tips appeared around the perimeter. People said that this is a mine that is designed for large monsters. Ricardo turned to everyone and shouted, "With you!" They all ran after him into the barrier. The hunters tried to do this, but it was already too late. So just a few moments later, there was a very powerful explosion in that very place. After it was all over, people's bodies were scattered around the area. Michael went there and said that it was powerful and really excellent. Considering the cost, it's not for nothing that they say that money can do anything, especially if you forget about conscience. He came closer and declared that it had all really been too easy. And this is what it means when a person acts so skillfully. Suddenly, he heard a voice shouting that he had finally found it. It was the protagonist who used the web of the great spider, and it was unraveled. He jumped on top and shouted while standing for the long sword of the Corisian dragon. Therefore, let him return this property to him right now. As Jason approached, he felt something strange and blood gushed from his mouth. The man said the boy was able to escape the blast using a web, but that wasn't the only trap he set. It was because of this boy that his plan almost completely failed. That's why he drove his blade into the guy's body and threw it in the other direction, hard. Elizabeth was nearby and immediately began to worry about Jason. She then turned to the system and used the Hell Blaster skill. Lucy shouted at her to stop. George tried to stop her and shouted at her not to go there or she would get hit too. A large stream of flame, in turn, was directed towards the opponent. It was so powerful that it destroyed everything in front of it, even stones. After using this very skill, blood immediately gushed from the girl's mouth. Her strength began to slowly leave her, so she fell to her knees, holding on to her own weapon. Ricardo shouted that the hell happened because he urgently needed to use his healing skills. But Lucy declared to the guild leader that mana should not be used here under any circumstances. A toxic gas was sprayed that blocked the absorption of mana. It also deals damage when used, and was likely released at the same time as that pillar exploded. It's a sophisticated and vicious weapon. It is used to paralyze the movement of high-level hunters, but why do they use such a dangerous thing? And the main character appeared from some dark liquid and was not in the best condition. And this magic was used by Michael, who appeared literally out of nowhere and said that he was an amateur. Ricardo saw what happened and shouted that it was incredible because this skill was familiar. Because this is the same forbidden technique that they were supposed to destroy in the past. Shadow movement is considered the highest level in hidden techniques, so it's completely unclear how he was able to use it at all. The man turned his attention towards the main character and saw the key to the golem's heart there. Without a second's hesitation, he immediately walked towards the object and picked it up, taking it into his hands. As a result of the system reporting that the key to the sealed heart was given to the current owner, Michael said that the goal was achieved. But even if so, there is still one thing, and he captured the main character. At the same time, he stated that this man needed to be killed right there. Jason replied that he had been thinking about that too, and his interlocutor asked if he was really conscious. The hero smiled and declared that this was his good fortune, since the one who stole the longsword turned out to be such a worthless bastard. The web that the guy used immediately began to wrap him and his opponent. The man's body continued to be wrapped again and again, and the Spider King's threads were disconnected. As a result of this action, the same spikes that were in the previous attack appeared. The subordinates asked what was wrong with the master. This was the skill that was used when they defeated the golem shift. Maybe they should run away too. The boy said that his mistake was that he dared to touch his longsword. Soon he said not to go, the Spider King was disabled. But when I looked at that very place, I was very surprised. All this because there was no one in the place where the man should have been. Michael used his power and said that he almost panicked, because it was the first time he used such a skill. But if there was no shadow inside, he would have simply died. So he didn't think that such a pathetic skill could almost kill him, but now he understood everything. All those high-level hunters he killed before, why did they have such helpless faces at that moment of death? But today, this guy will also die here. The hero asked if he knew his name, because his name is Mana Absorber because he shares mana with his comrades. For the first time, he tried to transfer it over a distance, and it worked. The opponent asked what he was talking about, and he was told that it would end here and now. Ricardo said that he doesn't know what's going on but feels a surge of mana, and it's just in time. He will put an end to the Blood Tower Guild right now. So he immediately used his dark magic, and in anger a magic circle appeared. Michael was very surprised and realized that this was Ricardo's dark lightning. It was the opposite skill of his shadow movement, and he wouldn't be able to escape, so it was bad. So he shouted at Sarah to do it right now and put everything back in its place. The girl said that she understood everything and immediately began to use her power. It was only because of this novel that it began to be released from containers in huge quantities. The subordinate used her skill and was told that the dungeon would be returned to its original state and also reset. Those present were surprised and did not understand what the hell was going on, and in general, what kind of strange wind was appearing here. Someone said that this is a very unusual wind, with the fragments of the golem moving along with it. So is it possible that they are coming together again? Elizabeth noticed what was happening and screamed that this couldn't be happening. Ricardo was also very surprised, asking if the dungeon had been reset to its original state. He made this judgment only because a huge number of small golems appeared and they fought. And they did not stand aside, but immediately rushed to attack the people they saw in front of them. The man used his enclosure and understood that everything was bad, because it was all because of the worthless poison that blocked the absorption of mana. Therefore, he has to protect everyone with a magical barrier. But he won't be able to attack the golems this way. At this rate, they won't last long. He needs to come up with something. Suddenly, he turned his attention to the side and was very surprised when he saw Elizabeth there. Because the girl, without a second's thought, used her strength and goal, they were destroyed one after another. The man asked the girl how she did it, and the woman asked if he hadn't heard Mr. Jason. Because his nickname speaks for itself, Ricardo noted that he understood it. But so what? Lucy healed the wounded and said that he is able to generate mana infinitely and share it with his comrades. They say that this is his unique skill. The Dark Wizard thought that this was impossible because he thought only magicians were capable of this, and here was this low-level no-name. In order to utilize their full potential as high-level hunters, they and Lady Elizabeth require enormous amounts of mana. And at the same time, he distributed mana not only to them but to everyone else in such a short time. So is this really endless mana regeneration? I have never heard of such a unique skill. If that's true, instead of searching for the giant golem's heart, they'd be much better off inviting Jason into their guild. Elizabeth interrupted her thoughts and said that now everything fell into place. The underground breakthrough on the Rainbow Bridge is clearly the work of the Bloody Tower Guild. George shouted that the problem now was that the dungeon had been reset to its initial state. It would be bad if they reset the dungeon again. Lucy said that it wasn't like that and she thought it was all unlikely. The fact that the hidden dungeons hadn't been discovered yet was most likely due to his logic. The girl doesn't know if they did it on purpose, but now the probability of a hidden dungeon appearing has become 100%. Elizabeth noticed that, however, something still didn't add up, and it had to do with the golems that appeared after the reset, because there are clearly fewer of these stone creatures than there were at the beginning. Ricardo said that probably the fragments that they melted were never able to recover. In any case, they can't drag it out at their own risk. They need to catch up with the scoundrels. The girl wondered if they really used the same method as the breakthrough on the Rainbow Bridge, but it couldn't be. It was just unbelievable. But the man thought that he was wondering how Jason was doing, because he hoped that these scoundrels were not able to kill him. On the rocky terrain, there was a ball that was made entirely of cobwebs, and after this, the main character ordered to tear apart the web of the great spider and was freed. At the same time, he felt that he was in great pain at that moment and realized that the person he was fighting with was simply a scoundrel. Earlier, the guy saw where his opponents were and immediately rushed to attack him. At the same time, he shouted that he should stay where he was and that in a few moments he would be killed. Michael naturally noticed this attack and blocked it with his weapon. And then he asked what he was doing barking, and also called him a Slovak. The main character shouted that he was going to defeat him and that it didn't take much effort. When he touched his opponent, he immediately activated the web of the great spider. The man shouted that it was a useless web. It was making it so that he would never be able to use it again. At that very second, there was a huge explosion, causing their bodies to be thrown aside. Michael then commanded the long sword of the Corisian dragon to release the level. At the same time, Jason protected himself with the web, and it saved him. And the power of the long sword is truly terrifying. But thanks to this, the boy understood how to fully utilize his power. It is unclear where this guy got so much information about him from, and the hero was able to block part of it. But not all of it. He will have to catch him and ask about it. Even though Jason had absolutely no idea where he was right now, it was bad because he was probably lost again. At the same time, the guild leaders were discussing in the Japanese Association. Georg said, "Don't worry so much, Mr. Dalton is with them, Mr. Ricardo from the Guild of the Future." The interlocutor said that the fact that the Blood Tower Guild is involved in this is a serious problem. They have too little information about them. Simon noted that this was true, and they were unable to kill even a high-level hunter, and it was almost impossible to gather information about them. But Midas was able to get something. The fact is that the bold actions they took were largely due to the presence of the International Guild of Hunter Starfield. Georg asked if this was really the organization they were talking about. Dalton was also surprised and asked what an international guild was doing in a Japanese dungeon, and more importantly, why they were involved with the Bloody Tower. Simon replied that this dungeon, despite its current appearance, was one of the ones destroyed during the great catastrophe that occurred 15 years ago. The army of golems that appeared at that moment was more terrible than hell itself. The rift was then sealed by one of the world's greatest magicians, the Japanese huntress Jennifer Nishihara. Dalton said it was all true. Without the lady's sacrifice at that moment, it was scary to imagine what could have happened. The man continued to say that the heart of the giant golem, sealed in a hidden dungeon, still attracts great attention from all over the world. Both organizations are willing to do anything to achieve their goals, so it is quite possible that they have joined forces to complete the Snow Golem Mountain dungeon. Plus, Lucy is the woman's daughter. Dalton said they know that. So in addition to the task of returning the longsword, they need to investigate the death. Simon said that Ms. Jennifer was not declared dead. The interlocutor asked what he was saying, that all the hunters who disappeared in that dungeon were never found. Each of them is declared dead, and do they think that she is still alive? The interlocutor noted that there are surviving witnesses. He returned from that dungeon 5 years ago. The man claims to have seen Mrs. Jennifer. Georg said that this couldn't be true. Simon continued to say that due to Starfield's secrecy, they only have partial information available. But it is a fact that what is even more interesting is this hidden dungeon. Suddenly, a subordinate ran into their room and shouted to the chairman that he had an urgent report. The man asked what had happened, since he had an important meeting right now. The guy shouted at the same time that a dungeon breakthrough had just occurred. The guard who stood at the entrance to this dungeon contacted the others and said that there had been a breakthrough. But it was the dungeon of the central city that was destroyed. Golems appeared, so there is panic and chaos all around. Simon realized that this is the same role we are from the dungeon of the Snowy Mountain, so it really collapsed during the passage. It is unclear what the hell is going on there. Michael, along with the rest of his guild, moved forward, but it was a bit difficult for him. Sarah asked if there were any problems with the passage, since this was the first time she had seen him get hurt like that. So were they really going in the right direction? The man noticed her and asked why she didn't check it out for herself. Then he told her to look carefully, and her interlocutor did so. Right in front of them was a bridge that led to the mountain, and this was the very same hidden dungeon. Sarah was surprised and wondered if she could really get the heart of the Ganian Golem after all. The Bloody Tower group immediately headed across this bridge to the new dungeon. Roger followed them using invisibility. He did not lose sight of these people at all and slowly followed them. And finally, I also saw a passage into that secret dungeon that had appeared there. When the guy saw it, he wondered if this was really that hidden area. The chief's subordinates were the first to move forward for reconnaissance. Suddenly, one of them touched something strange, which said his hand. So he immediately turned to the chief and shouted that there was something there. The man replied that it was a barrier. Naturally, the Starfield group warned him about it. Here it was in front of him 5 years ago. The great magician and the strongest hunter Jennifer sealed it. It is behind this barrier that the heart of the giant golem from the hidden zone is located. Michael told the others it was time to begin, to get ready for the barrier to be destroyed. It was also necessary to carefully watch the perimeter, so the subordinates rushed to their positions. The man told Sarah that his sword needed to be restored right now. Suddenly he noticed that he should wait a few moments because he felt some kind of rat. The girl turned her attention to the side and did not understand what this man was talking about. The chief pointed towards Roger and declared that he was a scoundrel who dared to use stealth against the Bloody Tower. The guy immediately became wary and did not understand what he should do. Michael, without stopping for a second, rushed into the attack and told him to die right now. It was a ferocious rabbit, a snow mountain that lives near the hidden area. The creature is a level 30 constantly hungry and aggressive rabbit monster. By defeating him, you can get a magic stone. The man rushed to attack and said, "It turns out that there are other monsters here besides golems." A very tiny golem was not far from the scene of the incident. When the ferocious rabbit was killed, the magic stone flew off to the side. The little creature saw this and immediately ran up to take the stone. Then he stopped and looked attentively at the man, as if asking him something. There was the main character who noticed that he was really asking if he could eat this magic stone if he did what he wanted. The small creature ate it without a second thought, but the hero was happy because he had already copied it anyway. I never even thought that the dramatizing golem could have such skills. With its help, you can create one golem if you invest in mana. The first skill allows you to create a level 1 golem according to your imagination. The second skill allows you to create and change the armor of a level 1 golem. The third one can share the sense of sight and hearing with the created golem. With the increase in level, the distance at which the sense can be shared increases. The hero understood the copying itself was successful, but it's a pity that he couldn't absorb the skills. Although the thing is cool, if the guy makes more cores, he will have an army of golems. This means that he doesn't need a guild to protect the dungeons. The Snow Mountain Golem can grow up to level 10, and the form can transform freely. It can also share feelings with its owner, the hero thought. If it is so big at the first level, then what will it be like at the 10th? Although if the golem grows into a huge pile, it will be quite inconvenient. Suddenly, the guy saw his protege jump up and attack the man. It turned out that it was Roger, who ducked and managed to get back from the small creature. Jason wondered if this was his subordinate. The boy saw the leader and, frightened, immediately ran up to him and climbed into his arms, saying that he thought he was going to die now. Soon they were running together and he spoke with faith. Had the bloody ones really found a hidden area? Although perhaps it would be for the best. Then he apologized and said that he didn't think that he would be noticed so easily. He thought that if you had a high-level disguise, he would be safe. The comrade noted that everything was fine with him, but the guy from the Guild of the Future was not so lucky, and he was killed. Jason thought that Ricardo was pretending not to care, but in reality he was thinking along the same lines as him. In any case, the Bloods were definitely not to be underestimated. The subordinates noticed that if you say, "By the way, you were the only girl there," the interlocutor asked what other girl was there. Roger noticed that he was right. She was absorbing mana with some devices, and suddenly this dungeon was reset. The guy thought about stopping her, but then he remembered what the boss told him and frankly he got scared, so he apologizes. The hero patted him on the head and said that everything was okay, because he had done well. The boy noticed that if we were talking about that same girl, it seemed like he had seen her somewhere, but he couldn't remember where. Then he turned his attention to the side and asked what kind of creature it was that was waiting behind them. The hero noticed that everything was fine with him, because he was his assistant. Roger asked if this was his golem, and it looks really cute. So it turns out the older one has familiars, and that's so cool. They arrived at the right place, and the guy said that there was a hidden area behind this bridge. He thinks that if they do something careless, they will be noticed immediately. Because among these people there are those who sense the hidden, the hero turned to him and said, "With you." He brought here Madame Elizabeth, as well as the head of Ricardo. The interlocutor asked what he was saying, because he would be left all alone, and they had the legendary sword. Jason said, not to worry, he had a way to track them. Roger said that he understood everything. Since he said so, he would do it, although he would like to stay with him. The chief took out the thing and told him to take it. The interlocutor asked if this was really the core of the migrating golem. It turns out that with its help, he summoned this little monster. Jason said that now it is his assistant. Besides, he really liked it. Despite its cuteness, the familiar is quite strong and will come in handy. The guy asked the elder if he could accept such a valuable gift. The hero wondered what other valuable gift he could give, since he had a whole wagon of them. Then the subordinate coped and thanked for this thing. He will immediately bring his sister, as well as the others. Jason thought, oddly enough, for the heir of a large guild, he was quite down to earth. Perhaps it was all the influence of Lady Elizabeth. Despite everything right now, raised that should create his assistant, and the system reported that the core of the migrating golem was used. The guy, he thought, really is giving up exactly as he imagined, and now he decided to throw mana into him. The hero created an unusual familiar, a bird that could fly in the sky. The system reported that the third skill was used, and now the hero shares his feelings. Jason watched with bird eyes what was happening and thought it was quite unusual. He finally saw what was going on there, and was a little surprised. So this is who the girl Roger was talking about, but it's not clear what she's doing with his legendary thing. Mana continued to be released in greater quantities from the containers, and the girl used her skill. Therefore, the system reported that the Coresian Dragon Longsword had returned to its original state. This weapon is a sword created from the essence that houses the soul of the Coresian Dragon. The required level is 30 or higher, and the modification level is plus 200, and it is given passively. The second skill is applied according to the total level. The passive one increases the user's defense by 35%. The first skill is called Vampirism. It absorbs 15% of the attack target's life force and mana. And the second skill, Berserk, is activated when the user's health drops below 15%. All user-level parameters are temporarily doubled. Duration is 1 minute, and recovery time is 1 day. Just now, the durability was at 6%. But very soon it began to rise and reached the level of 100. Therefore, the system reported that the durability of the Coresian Dragon Longsword had been fully restored. It was at its maximum, and only 94% was restored. After using her recovery skill, Sarah was almost exhausted. Michael, in turn, pulled out his sword and said that it was a good job. Finally, the durability was fully restored and the aura covered his body. Jason saw this and thought that it couldn't be that the legendary sword's durability had been restored, and this skill was very strange. Therefore, he can say that this girl is the bearer of a gift curse. If the weapon's durability has actually been restored, then this means that this girl has a restoration skill, in which case he simply has to copy this ability. At the same time, he immediately thought about whether he could copy other people's skills at all. He needed to figure out how to do this. If it didn't work out, everything would be bad. Otherwise, he will simply need to recruit this girl into his group. Michael said that it was finally time to break the hidden zone barrier. After that, he immediately headed towards him, using the weapon he had in his hands. When this happened, a strong flow of energy immediately began to spread throughout the area. Sarah felt it and tried to stay on her feet from the onslaught. The hero watched what was happening and wondered if this was really a barrier to a hidden zone. The man said that if it weren't for the information from Starfield, he would have had a hard time trying to break it with that key. 15 years ago, the great mage Jennifer cast this spell to seal the hidden area, and only the legendary blade of the legendary hunter can develop it. Sarah wondered what all this could mean. The man replied that the real owner of the longsword was Jennifer's husband, Frederick. He went missing along with his wife in this hidden area. The woman put a barrier on her, and so that no one could break it, she made her husband's blade the only key. The hero wondered if the real owner of the sword was the most legendary hunter in the world, the sacred sword Frederick and his wife, the greatest magician Jennifer and their Lucy. So that's what this gender weapon is for. Michael said that everything will be put off for later, and now it's time to open this Pandora's box. He commanded the Corisian dragon longsword to release its level. That is why a huge amount of energy began to spread in that very area. Sarah and the others hid to the side to protect themselves from this force. The hero realized that everything was bad because his golem could not withstand such a surge of energy. But all this is not even surprising because if the sword's strength had not been restored, it would have turned into the same dust as his familiar. The chains that surrounded the huge barrier soon began to gradually disappear, and in the barrier itself a huge gap appeared, near which Michael was located. He smiled and said that the dungeon gate was an illusion, and that he was probably worried for nothing. But now it was time to clear the hidden area of the snow mountain. We must move forward, because they must find the heart of a giant golem. The protagonist wondered what he should do now, whether he should pursue them alone. Mentally, he begged his subordinate to hurry. In the south of Italy, the dungeon with rank was quite interesting events. The man said that this man had come for him, so it was unclear why he hadn't killed only him, and all his comrades had. The interlocutor noted that if they killed only her, they would immediately understand that it was murder. But if they killed the entire group, it would look like an ordinary, unsuccessful raid. He used his power and blood gushed out. The system reported that since the owner of the ability died, the skill goes to the next available user. The man who did all this at once was left with a broken neck, and it was there that he got another time mark. Therefore, this man already had a fairly large amount of power. He used his system, which said it was highlighting all the objects here. After this, the man used the skill and cut out all the selected objects. Using this technique caused a huge hole to appear in front of him. He felt the presence of some person around him and immediately turned his attention there. It was the girl who said it looked like a discharge and fit well into his collection. Cutting out objects one by one was quite a chore, but now it saves a lot of time. The man said that in order to assign oneself to the cursed skill, one has to kill its owner every time, and this is quite troublesome. But what is more annoying is not even this, because when a skill is transferred to him, it does not evolve, and it is simply unbearable, the woman noted, as she was told. To adopt someone's skill is only possible by killing the owner. But to get the skill without killing the owner and at the same time have the opportunity to develop it, the insertion skill is required. The interlocutor stated that he had been looking for it for 10 years and could not find it anywhere, so he did not understand whether such a skill even existed. The girl said that in their world he was, albeit in a slightly different form, which means that in their world his presence is not in doubt. And besides, the search skill searches for the rest of the damned. The man noted that he understood this. And what about the cancellation skill? She reported that, judging by the information received, the Bloody Tower Guild had just destroyed Jennifer's barrier. In addition to the cancel skill, they absolutely need to obtain the heart of the giant golem. Without this item, they will not be able to use the full potential of the cursed skill. The interlocutor stated that in that case she would pass on the information to the others. The group led by Ricardo headed forward. The man said that it was a simple horror. Despite the fact that they were hurrying with all their might, it seemed that they were not here, just as there should have been a fight. So could it be that they had taken the wrong road? The main characters stated that not much time had passed since they entered here. It just looks like there aren't many monsters here since the road is straight. They should catch up with them very soon. Elizabeth asked Lucy if she had any idea where they might have gotten the information. The girl said that these were just her assumptions, but she thought that Starfield was behind them. The interlocutor asked if she was talking about this organization. It's unclear how it happened that a top international guild got involved with killers like the Bloody Tower. Lucy stated that her mother was most likely the cause. Jason thought that if it was Starfield, then that was where the Blood Tower was getting all its information from. The breakthrough of the Rainbow Bridge dungeon, as well as the theft of the legendary ball in the Snow Mountain Head, most likely all this was planned. And all this means that the upcoming hike will most likely not be so easy. In this battle, the key role will be played not by the cores of the believing Golem, but by Lucy herself. Ricardo shouted that they needed to hurry. It was easier to unravel everything from the villains from the Bloody Tower than to waste time on guesses, obviously, if Starfield was behind this. It becomes clear where they got their skills to move, and now all that remains is to catch them and interrogate them. Roger ran with his little familiar and asked the others to wait. The man asked him what kind of weirdo this was that was always running after him. The guy noticed that it was his familiar that Jason had given him. The guild leader noticed that it was a snow golem. And so that's how it was. The girl asked why. Why did he give such a valuable item to Roger? Jason replied that he was simply a very valuable member of the group and that he owed his own life to him. At the same time, the guy stepped on some kind of magic circle, which began to glow brightly. Ricciardo also got there, so the three of them were in that place. And after just a few moments, everyone simply disappeared. The main characters, together with Elizabeth, tried to do something, but they couldn't do anything. They all rushed forward, and after a few moments, they too found themselves in that magic circle. The hero saw a bright light and did not understand what was really happening now. They sat down because the energy of the place was quite strange. Then they tried to shout to Roger, as well as to Ricardo's head. The guy asked what was actually going on, since they had just been following them, and now they were nowhere to be seen. Suddenly he turned his attention to the side and noticed a terrible monster there, which alarmed him. It turned out to be a dragon, who saw people and immediately rushed to attack. Jason was horrified by this situation and did not understand where this creature could have come from. Elizabeth did not panic at all and, using her weapon, rushed forward. The first thing she did was use a skill called Witchblade and cut off the creature's head. So he immediately fell to the ground, crushing the soil beneath him. Jason wondered why a dinosaur-like monster appeared in the Golem's Snow Mountain. Lucy said that if we talk about this place, it seems to be in another dungeon. Most likely we can say that this is a multi-dimensional dungeon. The hero noticed that if she was talking about him like that, then what could all this mean? Elizabeth was screaming that this couldn't be and heard that these dungeons were destroyed. And all this happened just during the Great Disaster 15 years ago. The girl replied that it was true that her mother had sealed them all, but now one of them had been opened again. That's why we shouldn't forget that the hidden area in the snowy mountains was also sealed. And there were magic circles installed in the multi-dimensional dungeons. And they connect them with different dimensions. When the magic circle is activated, a portal opens, connecting their world with other dimensions. That's why there's a risk that they'll end up in an extremely dangerous dungeon right now. Elizabeth said that's why Mistress Jennifer put a barrier in that area. Lucy said her mother thought it was the multi-dimensional ones that were out of control. In the end, it was they who caused the great disaster, Jason said. But then, where are their comrades? In response, he heard, they are probably in the dungeon of another dimension. If they go through each zone in sequence, they will eventually reach the heart of the giant golem. The hero said that this was at least some chance, and when it was time to quickly pass this place. After that, he turned his attention to the side and saw that there were many dinosaurs there. George noted that this was easy enough to say, but very difficult to do. And in the central city there was a tense atmosphere. There was destruction all around, as well as explosions. It was here that the huge golems raged, attacking the seemingly protective people. Naturally, in order to confront these creatures, hunters were sent here to fight them. They said that everything was bad, because if you don't destroy the core, everything is useless. Then he turned to the magician to hit with mass damage. The wizard noted that he couldn't now because they didn't drop the potion, so he had very little mana. He would be glad if someone helped him. Hunter shouted that it was bad enough. This guy who always refills mana when he's needed. The man remarked that he would never have thought that they would need Mononos so badly. And while these people were fighting with another huge monster, another one appeared from behind. The hunters didn't have time to do anything with him, but suddenly another person appeared and saved them. He fought with a large katana and then landed on the ground with ease. The boy thanked him for saving him and asked if he was a foreigner. Charlie stated that he was on a business trip and couldn't just stand by and watch. The man thanked him for saving him. Another man noticed that his Japanese was very good, and that was why he was wearing a suit. The foreigner noticed, by the way, what is Manonos, because now he even became interested. The hunter said that none of this mattered, because he was a weak boy, he couldn't fight, and his only skill was infinite mana regeneration. That's why he distributed it to all his allies. The interlocutor asked where he could meet this person. The man replied that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, so he didn't know. Just like that, today he remembered about it. Charlie wondered if he had never even heard of the skill of infinite mana regeneration. It was unclear whether such a thing really existed. Suddenly, someone shouted, "They finally appeared here." The guy turned his attention up and saw that there was the head of Simon from the Midas Guild and the head of Dalton from the Taken Guild. Well, it looks like they're in for quite an interesting show. Dalton noticed that it was definitely a giant golem, and there was no doubt that it was a breakthrough from the Snow Golem Mountain dungeon. Of course, this is the perfect opponent for Simon's head, and he will also impose a buff on him. The interlocutor said that he is a perverted scoundrel. It was not at all clear what was really going on in this dungeon, so he rushed to the attack and shouted to tell the chairman, namely, that on the pride for this will be compress them from the warehouse with class equipment. At that moment, the man put on stone armor. After he landed down, he soon looked more like a golem than a human. The first creature that noticed him immediately rushed to attack. The man said that all stones are different and that his opponent was nothing but a nobody. So with just one blow, he easily cut down the creature in front of him. After that, he continued to move forward and demolished everything that was visible before his eyes. Therefore, a large number of nuclei began to rise upward and had to be destroyed. To do this, Dalton used his power. Therefore, a magic circle formed around him, which he soon directed forward. And this very flash demolished everything in its path, destroying the nuclei that were raised up. Simon smiled and said that this old man could kill everyone himself, and he himself said that he would put a buff on him. And so the man reached the largest golem, which was destroying everything in its path. The monster saw the man in stone armor and rushed to attack him. Guildmaster Midas asked him if he really thought he had a chance since he was just dust. That's why a reinforcement soon appeared and his fist became covered with stone spikes. As a result of this attack, the golem's huge stone hand and the man's stone hand could be heard speaking to each other. But unfortunately for the huge monster, his strength was not enough to resist the man. Therefore, it gradually began to crack and break into pieces, and soon was completely destroyed. It was because of this that only the core that remained of it appeared in the sky. Simon then shouted that he would never let the old man wallpaper him and kill the boss. So he grabbed the cannonball with his stone hand and destroyed it in a few moments. The system reported that the boss was defeated, so the rift was successfully sealed. The hunters who were there and fighting rejoiced at this victory. Charlie used the search skill and saw that the user did not have the skill. He just realized that this man's name was Simon, and he was the best hunter in Japan, as well as the head of the Midas Guild. In the end, he managed to break through the dungeon in less than 10 minutes, and that's without any damn skills. All this is quite useful information. On top of all this, he wondered if the cancel skill from the dungeon had returned yet, hoping that she hadn't died in that battle. And just when he was remembering this, the girl received a serious wound in her side. All this happened 20 minutes ago, when unidentified creatures appeared in front of the group. The man saw a huge number of them and said what this horde of zombies meant. They don't have any information yet about what will happen next, so they'll have to rely on luck alone. The measurement looks simple enough, so maybe they got lucky this time. When he spoke about it, you had already used your power and used weapons. So the large number of zombies that were right in front of them were easily destroyed. Soon, only ruins and corpses of creatures remained in this place. The system reported about the man that he had cleared the hidden zone and there would be a transition to the boss arena. Everyone understood what awaited them and immediately prepared for this action. Some kind of energy began to form under my feet, which spread strongly to the sides. One of the chief's subordinates shouted that they had finally reached the boss. Michael saw the door in front of him and said that apparently this very key was needed for this door. So he immediately went there and stuck the key straight into the keyhole. The door actually gave in to this manipulation, and when they opened it, it moved forward. The subordinates saw the huge statues and asked what they were, but perhaps they were just statues of gods. One of the men said that there was a chance they had arrived too early and the boss had not yet had time to respawn. Sarah thought that she didn't understand what he was talking about. As soon as they entered the air, it became heavy, as if something was pressing on her from the side. So is it really true that no one notices this right now? Maybe they've already gotten used to this oppressive aura, the guy said. And apparently it is so, because then you should just take the reward and leave here. But as he was speaking about this, a huge hand appeared above his head and easily crushed this man. It was precisely the one who did this, and it was the very article that immediately went forward. The rest of the organization realized that everything was bad, since the statue was the boss, which meant that the other statues would also fight. In fact, as soon as he said this, Everyone else also came to life and headed forward to attack. At the same time, Sarah was very scared because she understood that she was completely incapable in battle. The girl looked at her dead comrade and was horrified. Michael wondered what had happened to her because she had seen other people die more than once. So he immediately shouted for her to come to her senses immediately because he was still breathing and let her heal him. The interlocutor immediately came to her senses and realized that she needed help now. So she turned around and ran towards the man who should still be alive. There she stopped and took out a mana storage that spread energy around. But when I looked into the storage of this energy, I realized that there was none there at all. I also paid attention to other storages, and it was unclear why the mana was leaking. It couldn't be that the seal on the batteries couldn't be removed even by high-level dispel. It was unclear what was happening. All the mana was flowing in one direction, but it was unclear where. The statues continued to attack the rest of the organization, and they tried to escape. The leader then shouted to them not to be afraid to go on the attack, because they were big, but in the end, they were just golems. So he didn't stop for a second and rushed to attack one of the statues, which he easily struck with his weapon. Then he shouted to the rest of his subordinates to use mines on the big monsters. The guy said that they were trying to do it, but the mines and skills didn't work at all. As she was speaking at that moment, a monster appeared right above him, which again killed this guy quite easily, and threw the head aside, and he screamed that everything was bad. Then he again turned his attention to the very statue that had grabbed his subordinate. She held him in her arms mercilessly and crushed him. Michael couldn't believe his eyes at how cruel these statues were. He then went on to say that things were really bad, because if everyone else died, things would be bad. Because if this actually happens alone, he will never be able to cope with the job. Michael called these huge villains stone idiots and prepared for battle, ordered his Coresian dragon longsword to release its own level. But at the same time, the system reported that there was not enough mana to release the longsword level. The man asked what this was because his level was over 300. So it was unclear how there was not enough mana. Then he saw the statue's hand right in front of him and realized that everything was very bad. Luckily for him, he could still move in the shadows. That's why he used this skill and hid. At the same time, Sarah was heading after a stream of mana that was heading somewhere in the other direction. And so, in one of the secret rooms, she saw where all the mana was accumulating, because this thing was absorbing it. Then she tried to get closer to it and do something. But this thing was releasing a huge amount of energy. Because of the very bright light, nothing could be seen of what was inside, but the girl managed to touch it. Then she picked up this huge thing and asked if it was the heart of a Ghanaian golem. But it was unclear why it absorbed mana and did not regenerate it. A few moments later, she saw the object begin to break into pieces. Sarah realized that this was very, very bad and she had to get out of there immediately. That's why she tried to escape from there. But a huge flow of energy had already begun to be released. One of the deadly rays immediately released itself and flew towards the girl. Just at the moment this happened, Sarah was in his path and was struck in the side. The man immediately lost his concentration due to the instant and strong attack, so he fell to the ground. It was painful enough for her to scream from it. By this very action, Sarah naturally attracted attention to herself, and the statue noticed her. So she immediately headed towards the girl to attack and swung her weapon to kill her. When this happened, a shadow appeared immediately next to her body, and Michael had already appeared from it, who tried to stop the statue from killing the girl. The creature was strong enough that the man even experienced severe pain. Then he took out an advanced healing potion from his inventory. Hunter's Association restores 80% of health and reduces incoming damage when taken. Additionally, in an emergency situation, it can be applied directly to the wound to support the body. So Michael did just that, and after that he grabbed Sarah on his shoulder and started running away. At that moment, the system informed him that the giant golem's heart had awakened, and a boss fight was beginning. The man was terrified and did not understand what all this meant. And the very door through which they entered here began to close, and the man saw it. Of course, this was already very bad, and he began to panic, but he realized that he should use the shadow movement skill. But at that moment, the system reported that there was not enough mana to use the shadow movement skill. Michael was completely at a loss as to where all his mana had gone. That's why we had to run forward without stopping for a second. The man tried to get to the door, which was already almost not closed. He understood that this was all very, very bad. The door was closing, and at this rate, they would both be stuck here. So he decided what he needed to do right now and grabbed the girl by the clothes. After that, having picked up quite a bit of speed, he threw her forward and managed to push her out the closing door. Her body slowly rolled along the ground and stopped on the other side. Soon Sarah tried to rise a little and asked why he did it. But the man smiled and noted that if she survived, Then she would probably be able to fix everything. A few moments later, the door slammed shut. The girl stated that he was a fool because she was not a hunter, and therefore could not absorb mana, so she would not be able to return everything to how it was. Thoughts appeared in her head that she had come here in vain, because if she died, what would happen to her mother and father? At that moment, she really felt very warm. Could it really be Mana? The girl tried to open her eyes a little and saw a guy in front of her, but she didn't understand who he was. Jason saw her open her eyes and asked if she was okay. Sarah thought that this man was the hunter who was giving out mana to everyone. She felt that her body was gradually gaining strength, and at this rate she might even be able to survive. The hero gradually began to do this and did not say a word, concentrating on her own strength. He soon asked if it was true that if she had enough mana she could restore her body, and she was surprised that he knew about her ability. Ricardo shouted, "Are they really joking now because they finally got here but they can't open the useless door?" Lucy said if there are still hunters inside undergoing tests, the door won't open by itself. There is a sure way. It's a key. But as far as they know, they don't have it. The man shouted that this was bad. He should have first defeated the revived wandering golem and only then come here. Then I paid attention to the girl and asked, by the way, who she was. In response I heard, apparently, she is the main healer of people. The Bloody Tower. E was fatally wounded, but thanks to Mr. Jason's mana, she managed to restore herself, and they put her in special handcuffs. It does not suppress mana, and when they get out, they will need to interrogate her from here. The man said it is easy to say that if they do not pass, this place will be trapped. Lucy replied that this option was also possible. Ricardo said that this is why there are so many missing people in this dungeon, and perhaps he too will get lost in these mountains. The main character, while wondering what to do, whether he should use the key that he copied, then ordered the system to open his inventory. There were a huge number of different items, among which were 2 keys to the test chamber, the hearts of a giant golem. The guy took one out and thought he could say it was just lying around. Lucy wondered if this was the door that Mom had sealed. Then there was something inside. That's why she went to the keyhole, and when she touched it, her hand began to fall inside. The girl was very surprised when this happened, and the symbols on the door began to glow green. Everyone present was very surprised by this when the door began to open. Elizabeth asked how she had opened it. From under her mantilla there was a light, the same as on the door. The girl said that this mantle belonged to her mother. It seemed that she had reacted with the door. The hero realized that the girl was the key to this dungeon. He would have to explore this multi-dimensional labyrinth with her. Roger, who was nearby, asked what this terrible pressure was. Sister said to be careful. Once they enter, their mana will start to disappear. The hero turned his attention to Sarah and asked if this was what she meant, to which the girl answered positively. All this happens because the heart of the giant golem absorbs all the mana around it, and it seems to process it into its own. Jason realized that if this was mana absorption, then if that was the case, then everything was clear. Sarah shouted, "They need to leave here immediately. Even a high-level hunter without mana can't defeat this." The guy asked what she meant. From the opened door, 2 huge statues appeared and walked forward. Roger asked what kind of crap this was. Elizabeth turned to Mr. Jason and shouted for him to give them mana. The guy replied that he would do everything now. So I used my power again and thought everything would be fine. Then he shouted with you. All these creatures shuddered before the great Mononos, so the system reported copying the user's mana. The copy and paste went on long enough that the system got stuck and said it was repeating the paste forever. It was because of this that it was clear that a huge amount of mana was emanating from the main character. Sarah was simply taken aback when she saw it and did not understand what it was, because mana was flooding the entire dungeon. And it turns out that this is despite the fact that she is also being absorbed by that cube at an incredible speed. The girl looked at Jason and realized that with his help, she could definitely save her mom and dad. Elizabeth thanked the guy for his help and said that it would definitely be enough to defeat these statues, so she used the Great Witchblade. Because of this attack, the huge stone creature that was in front of the girl was immediately killed. Ricardo also did not retreat from his attacks, using his dark power. He said that if he had mana, then it was just boulders and pieces of stone. That's why he used a magic called the Dark Thunder Spear and killed the statue. The creatures that were in front were defeated, but suddenly others appeared. The man asked if he had brought his friends, but it was just in time and he was so pissed off by this dungeon that he was going to take it out on them. So he used his dark magic again, namely a huge attack called the Dark Thunder Scale. Sarah looked carefully at the room they were in right now. When I turned my attention to the side, I saw Michael, who was sitting under the wall, and I realized that it was him. The moment she walked, she got closer to this man and realized that he was still breathing. Just because of this, it is still definitely possible to bring him back to life. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to Jason, who came close to Michael. The guy looked closely at the man but did not take any action. He just bent down and took the weapon that was lying next to him. The hero thought, finally this long sword was in his hands. As expected, the durability was fully restored. Now he can tell for sure that this girl is the owner of a cursed ability, so he will definitely copy her skill. Well, first I decided to try to do something else right now. So he came closer to the man and, touching him with his hand, told the system to copy the shadow movement skill of the target. But the copying failed because the target's level was higher than the user's. The hero realized that even with the boost from the longsword, he was still weaker. Saw that the target has strong hostility towards the user. In this case, there are two options for obtaining the skill. The first option is to destroy the target and also absorb his skill. The second option is forced absorption of the skill, and can be chosen if the target's health is below 15%. However, the target will not be able to use the skill afterwards. The hero thought, really, if he considers him an enemy, he can kill him and get his skill, so it can be done. But now he clearly has less than 15% health. This means that you can absorb a skill without killing it, and forced absorption can be useful even in the future. Ricardo turned to Sarah and said that she was a healer, so let her cure him, to the point where he could walk on his own and nothing more. When he said this, you immediately broke the shackles. Noticed that he had a lot of questions for him, and if he ran away it would end badly for both of them. After being released, she immediately looked at the main character. Then she approached Michael and began to use her power to restore him. Jason noticed that the severed arm literally grew back instantly. It is because of this that this skill, comparable to his, which allows one to copy the body. Soon the man began to cough up blood quite heavily. But when Sarah asked him why the old man was grinning, her interlocutor noted that he had said that they were both alive. After a short recovery, the girl immediately turned around and went in the other direction. But Elizabeth came up to Michael and immediately put shackles on him. She said that she hoped he would be able to get out of these handcuffs, and then she would be able to kill him. Let him say thank you to the main Ricardo that they didn't leave him here to die, the man noticed. Everything will be as she says. Just let him lead them out of this hell. Then she turned her attention in another direction and said that it was just about to start. When the man said this, a bright flash appeared on the mountain. Michael took the attention away from himself and decided to take advantage of this action, so he ran forward. The girl went ballistic when she saw what had happened and shouted that he was a scoundrel. A bright beam immediately spread throughout the room and headed towards the people. Roger noticed what had happened and immediately shouted to his sister about it. And deadly rays were emitted from the cubes that contained the golem's heart. The hero saw this very beam flying towards the guy and shouted to him about it. Roger noticed this, but otherwise he had no time to dodge. He was also followed quite quickly by a familiar who wanted to save his master. 30 minutes ago, Ricardo used dark lightning in the multidimensional skeleton dungeon. Roger's familiar saw a large number of crystals, so the boy asked if he really wanted to eat these magic stones. The man said that he could eat them all because they didn't cost much money. That's why the little bread stopped near these crystals and gradually began to eat them. The system reported that the Snow Mountain Golem had increased to level 2 by 25%, but could grow to level 10. He can also freely change form at the second level and can share feelings with the owner also at the second level. Roger came closer to him and patted him on the head, saying that he had leveled up. Suddenly, the creature began to interact with him in some way, and the guy asked what it was. And right now, the owner of this little golem was attacked. The baby did not lose his composure and immediately interacted with his owner, putting stone skin on him. The hero saw this and wondered if the creature had merged with Roger. It was unclear how he had managed to raise his level in such a short period of time. Ricardo thought, no matter how many times he sees it, it really looks like Master Simon's stone skin skill. So this is how the golem core is used. He would have to deal with this when he got back. Suddenly he saw his barrier being pierced by a beam, and he clearly saw this attack and easily returned from the deadly weapon. Lucy told him to be careful, these beams are made of pure mana. This mana is so dense, the beams are so sharp that he won't be able to block it with his defensive magic. Elizabeth joined the conversation and said that, despite this, things weren't that bad, because that's why they can be blocked by physical force. Suddenly she noticed an attack flying towards her and used the Witchblade. So she easily reflected the deadly beam that was directed towards her. The hero thought that everything was exactly as the girl said. It is because mana is so dense that they can physically defend themselves with swords or shields, so even Roger's device can block them. But they still cannot move forward if they simply continue to defend themselves. Because the guy can infinitely restore his mana, The giant golem's heart can continuously shoot beams. They need to get close enough to the place to destroy it, or not, everyone will just die. So they need to find a way to do that. And now you have been using the new power that you have recently received. So now it is time for shadow technique. That guy from the bloody tower was able to move through the shadows even inside the threat of the giant king spider. So now the hero can use his skills without anyone knowing. The system reported that using the giant spider's threads activated the shadow movement skill. So the hero who wrapped his body in threads disappeared somewhere. George saw this and was surprised, so he asked if he had disappeared. But the guy, in turn, simply moved to the very place where the golem's heart was located. He found himself on the healthy side where there were no rays and could be at ease. Then he came closer and said that the resonant frequency of Quaishi should be enough to destroy this thing. After that, he concentrated his energy and tried to destroy that very place. But when he tried to do it, he felt pain and blood gushed from his mouth. It turns out that this cube combined mana to create an explosion. Jason screamed, "Who the hell was he? Because he was the one who gave him mana, didn't he know that?" The hero touched the same ball again and used the spider's threads to seal it. Therefore, a huge number of them began to gradually approach the ball from which the rays emanated. So very soon it was completely sealed. Ricardo, as well as everyone else, wondered if the protagonist had managed to seal the giant golem's continuous attacks. Roger smiled that his elder really was cool, but despite the joy which did not last long, they saw that the rays began to spread again. Jason also realized what had happened, so he said that all this was not enough. It was because of this that I again headed towards the cube and used the threads of the giant spider. The guy thought that if he could touch him just one more time, he would definitely win. And yet he managed to do it, so he said that everything was ready. The system reported that the use of the Quaishi resonant frequency was to destroy the target. A huge friendly energy immediately began to spread throughout this object. The hero saw that the system reported that he had increased his level, and cracks appeared on that very deadly cube. At the same time, the ice golem's heart broke into pieces after a few moments. And when this happened, a very bright flash of light began to appear in that place. The hero saw a system window that informed him that he had destroyed the heart of the giant golem, and the dungeon was cleared. The guy smiled and was happy when he saw this, so he thought that everything was as he expected. The system reported that a huge number of new levels had appeared. The hero was happy because he had increased them very much. The system then reported that he had acquired a reward item, which was the heart of a level 1 giant golem. The first skill can regenerate mana infinitely, and the second skill can absorb or store mana up to a certain item, and it can also be developed. Jason thought he was adjusting mana infinitely. He didn't need it, but he thought he'd copy and paste it just in case. The ability to dock has been leveled up and will now automatically copy objects that can be copied. The hero saw this and realized that automatic copying is very cool. Roger ran up to him, shouting that this was expected from his elder, and he really was amazing, but the hero asked not to hug him. When this happened, Ricardo immediately turned to him, and the guy looked at him. The man said it looked like he somehow managed to get the heart of a giant golem. And that was good work, the guy said. Somehow there was no need to add. Elizabeth remarked that if he wanted to praise someone, why not do it properly? Because that way he would seem like a small person. Ricardo told Jason that he wanted to have a serious talk with him when they got back. The guy remarked that if he wanted the heart of the hell golem, he would sell it to him for a rather high price. And the girl asked if he could first discuss such important issues with the association when they returned. The man asked why she was trying to interfere with them. She said she couldn't ignore such genuine deals, and the other person asked what other genuine deals there were. Finally, the fight ended, and the protagonist headed towards Lucy and George. The hero notices that it is a gift from Lucy's mother, and he apologizes for returning it so late. The girl accepted it and said it was okay. She was grateful that the guy returned it as he promised. George only asked to wait. Did he really use the same skill that the Bloody Tower Guildmaster used on them? Ricardo noticed, now that it was mentioned, that he had indeed managed to cover a huge distance in just an instant. Jason was alerted and said that the general's royal string receiving skill had increased in level, and he was able to move very quickly while hanging on the rope. The interlocutor didn't really believe him and looked at him in surprise. Elizabeth noted that it was unpleasant to ask about someone else's skills and that she should go back. She needed to hurry with the investigation about these guys. Michael turned to Sarah and noted that she would still have to pay him back for saving her, so she should hurry and reset the dungeon. The interlocutor asked if he was out of his mind, then agreed, but it would be the last time. The man asked if it was because she found out about the boy with infinite mana. although it would be difficult if she suddenly forgot about the contract. The permanent restriction will never allow her to pass on her partner. She has on her hand a bracelet of promise. So while this thing is on her hand, she will not be able to escape from him. And let her also remember that even her parents are in his hands. So let him drop it right now because he risked his life to save her, so she should repay him. There should also be enough mana in this location to do this. Sarah, in turn, had no choice but to obey his order. The hero felt what was happening and thought that this could not be. And then the girl sat down on the ground and, touching it, began to use her power. Jason shouted to the others to hurry out of the dungeon because it would be recharged again soon. Lucy asked how it was recharged, because if it did, who knows what dimension they would end up in. The protagonist realized that all this was very bad and therefore used the shadow step. That's why literally in a moment he was already next to the girl. At the same time, I asked her why she was doing all this. Looking at him, the interlocutor did not answer, but the guy saw how her eyes were full of tears. So she didn't stop and used her recharge technique to reset this dungeon. The main character rushed after her and tried to drag her away from there. The green energy that appeared after using the girl's ability pulled everyone around. As a result, there were several green barriers in this space, as well as a red one. But they too could not withstand the onslaught of all this energy and flew away in the other direction. So very soon those who were pushed out of another dimension found themselves in the central city. Those present noticed that a gap had appeared in the energy that was in front of them. Roger shouted at the protagonist, trying to get through to him. Elizabeth asked if she was in the sky above Tokyo. But what happened here, Lucy noted. Why it happened, she herself does not know. However, everything is not so simple, and suddenly Elizabeth heard someone talking to her. It turned out that it was her father who asked what they were doing there, and the girl was surprised when she noticed him. Ricardo was also amazed and asked where Chief Dalton came from. The man replied that he had the same question for them, whether they had passed the dungeon. By the way, where are the rest of the team members? Another leader said that the thing is that a strange situation happened there. The daughter of the man they were talking to began to explain what had happened to Jason. At the same time, Michael was in the dungeon and asked what was happening, whether the dungeon had not returned to its original state. Sarah explained that this guy had gotten in her way, so she couldn't roll everything back to the way it was. The interlocutor replied that it was nothing to worry about. It looked like the others had disappeared and there were no longer any shackles on him. So all you need to do is get the heart of the giant golem and that's it. Jason yelled at him to cover his mouth and immediately used the giant spider web. But both of his skills reported that the item was not found. The hero was very surprised when he saw this and thought, "How come this hasn't been found yet? What the hell is going on?" Sarah asked. So she really just rolled back not the dungeon, but him. The hero thought, "Is this a joke? Because the memory and the state of the body have not changed," so he called a window to see what happened. There the guy saw that his level was number 1, his health was low, and his class level was also first and his skill level was also first. Jason thought, how is this the first level? Did he return to his original state upon awakening? But then, what about his damn skill? Saw that both of them were at level 1 and realized that the skills had also returned to their initial state. It was said that one unconfirmed object had been found. It was available for copying and pasting. The guy didn't understand what it was and suddenly blood gushed out right next to him. It turned out that Michael had gotten him drunk without thinking twice about it, in order to kill him. The man said that it seemed like he was unlucky, because the level returned to its initial state, just in time to lower that scoundrel would simply die. Jason thought, he needs to be calmer because the curse has not disappeared. There is also an unconfirmed object to copy. Perhaps this is him before he was rolled back. This is precisely why one should simply give in and be defeated. Suddenly, Michael clashed with George, who also remained in this dungeon. The man noted that he was surprised. He was the man from the International Association, and hunters did not know that he was here. The protagonist asked if George was here, but why was that so? The interlocutor shouted at him to cross himself and leave it to him, so that he could just run away. Jason replied that this was not the case and that he would never abandon him. Michael started laughing loudly at this and asked if he was being too cheeky right now, because the person he's fighting right now is just dirt under his fingernails. As a result, let him not dare to be distracted when fighting alongside him. The weapon he was defending himself with was destroyed and the sword pierced his stomach. So as a result of this rather strong attack, the man flew far to the side. The enemy leader rushed forward and said that he had better go anyway and destroy their stupid office. The guard realized that this man was too fast, so he would not have time to dodge the attack. But in order to protect his comrade in arms, a hero rushed into battle and offered his back. As a result, a huge amount of blood gushed out of his wound, and he immediately fell to the ground. George saw what just happened and asked why he did it. The hero noticed this guy is his prey and he doesn't need help. So let him get out of here right now. Michael asked what this bastard was talking about. Let him die right now. That's why he rushed into the attack again and thereby cut the body of the guy in front of him. As a result of this fairly instantaneous attack, the main character was cut into two parts, and one could say that he definitely died. The enemy leader smiled and said how he did not think this scoundrel had returned to his previous state, but the items remained intact. He turned to his subordinate and asked if she understood that she could only count on him. Let her not look at him. I am sure that he fell into despair when she rolled back his progress. Probably this scoundrel is already thanking him from the other world. It was precisely for saving him from all this suffering that the hero said he was truly grateful that he had killed him and cut off the man's hand. Michael immediately grabbed his limb and began to scream loudly in pain. The main character was right in front of him and said that he was afraid but didn't have the guts. The man, as well as Sarah, were very surprised when they saw this. The opponent asked in despair what the hell was going on here, since he had killed him with his own hands. He immediately went with the weapon that was on the ground and asked what kind of skill this was. Then he rushed into the attack and asked what kind of person this was or what he was like in general, in reality. The protagonist could finally use his inventory and use the web of the great spider. The man called him a fool and asked if he had forgotten, used the skill of moving in the shadows on the system, reported that it was missing and could not be used. Now the opponent was absolutely horrified and asked what this was, then shouted at Sarah to roll back the dungeon right now. But the subordinate screamed that she would not do this because she did not want to. The main one started yelling at her even more and asked if she had really forgotten about the Adam's Ring agreement. If she didn't want to die, she should quickly return the dungeon to its original state. With the help of this very bracelet, he began to spread energy, and it caused pain to the girl. The protagonist noticed what happened and understood why she obeyed that very man. Most likely, it was all because of the bracelet she had on her hand. So, without a second thought, the guy rushed towards her and stopped next to her. Immediately after this, he touched the bracelet with his hand and began to manipulate it. He used the copy skill, namely, he used the Quaishi resonator. So, after just a few moments, the bracelet that had been holding her all this time was destroyed. Sarah was shocked when she saw what happened and could not believe her eyes. Michael screamed for him to stop, because this scoundrel would definitely get his head ripped off. Then he tried to do the shadow movement skill again. But in turn, he did not understand why he still did not work. Jason noted that there was a good reason for this. After that, he used this skill himself and said that it now belonged to him. At the same time, he used his weapon and cut his opponent's body. So he immediately fell to the ground because he was bound by the web. George was surprised when he saw what happened, and the guy was heading towards the golem's heart. Then he picked it up and said that all this was because of this pathetic little thing. It turns out that this man caused the dungeon to break through and take so many lives. At that moment, he used Quaishi's vibration and said that a person like him deserved nothing, and then broke the golem's heart. As a result, the system reported that the high-level dungeon folk item was destroyed, and a unique reward was also received. Soon, the very same reward item appeared in Jason's hands. The system reported that the hidden dungeon, the heart of the giant golem, had been completed. The other hunters were surprised and said that the door had opened, meaning the dungeon was protected. So they slowly began to go inside, but asked what it was because there was no one here. Suddenly, one of the men saw the guy and noticed that it was Mr. Jason. So I asked if he wasn't with Chief Ricardo and Miss Elizabeth. The hero said that he lost them during the cleanup, but they were together, so there was no need to worry. The hunters asked if it really meant that he had cleared out this dungeon alone. Jason smiled and remarked that it could be said that way, so it was time to go back already. The next day, the guy and the rest of the hunting organization had a dialogue. He sat at the table at the meeting next to Ricardo, so that he would be close by. The rest of the present snake forces began to discuss what happened, Dalton said. The hidden dungeon in the snowy mountains of the golems turned out to be multidimensional, and this is bad. It is said that passing through such a dungeon affects other dimensions as well. Simon said that this was understandable, so that was the reason for the breakthrough. Georg said, "What's more important is that the seal of Lady Jennifer was removed. The multidimensional dungeons were the harbingers of a great disaster." "It was about a disaster that happened 15 years ago," the man said in his head. "But wasn't it too early to draw such conclusions?" Another person chimed in and said that it was true. It was just one destroyed multidimensional dungeon. Georg noticed, then they also said such naive things. In response to this, the man asked what he was saying and how he could do this. Elizabeth could no longer listen to everything they said and immediately hit the table. She then said that she was sorry, but she was taking her leave, and they needed to interrogate the members of the Blood Tower Guild as soon as possible. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to solve this problem. Simon asked if she thought they were just having fun while they were gone, and who she thought was dealing with the breach they had caused. Ricardo immediately asked everyone to calm down. They didn't expect this either, and he was told that the heads had made every effort to solve this problem. The interlocutor said that he was not saying all this to brag. Then he approached the hero and noticed that it was the hunter who was speaking. Jason cleared the hidden dungeon. If the rumors are true, then why haven't they heard anything about him? And who is he anyway? The guy smiled and said that he was a hunter. Simon claimed that he knew who he was and still decided to mock him. The hero rose from his seat and asked what he wanted from him. He cleared the hidden dungeon with minimal losses and also discovered a dangerous multi-dimensional dungeon. In his opinion, this is a reason for praise, not interrogation. Simon got angry when he heard about this and said that it was interesting. He knows who he is and continues to twist his head. Ricciardo took notice of this situation and realized that a major conflict was brewing. The others wondered if they were really planning to start a fight right there. The chairman at the same time immediately turned to the head of Midas. He said if he continues like this, he won't get a reward for eliminating the dungeon breach. Immediately after these words, the man calmed down for a while. Of course, he was still angry and told the protagonist that he was lucky this time. Jason noticed his technique and wondered if it was stone armor, but could he copy it? Soon, everyone headed to the office of the association chairman. Georg asked if it was correct that he was the hunter Jason, but which guild he belonged to. The hero said that he used to be in the Tycoon Guild, but for some reason he is now a freelancer. The girl wondered if he was really there. The man told the hunter it was hard to level up alone, and yet he was able to clear an extremely dangerous hidden dungeon. And that was impressive. So well done. On behalf of the association, he expresses gratitude to him. The hero, naturally, thanked him for this, wondering if this really meant that the chairman himself had recognized him. George also spoke of his thanks to the representatives of the International Hunters Association. And if he could find out their further plans, Lucy said, first they would go back. To finish it all, George added that he plans to stay here and is also going to retire from the International Association in Hunters. Very soon the main character headed home, but there were a lot of people there, and he asked them to wait, because this was his house, so it was unclear what the hell they were all doing here. George said that he had left because of the international situation. That's why now he has nowhere to live and will have to live with him for some time. Lucy wondered why he decided to do this, and the man said that he apologized but could not yet explain the reasons. Roger said that he and his assistant simply could not leave the elder. Elizabeth said she simply came to deliver Sarah's demands, so she shouldn't be equated with these people. The hero noticed, by the way, that those two are still there. The girl replied that Michael was detained and was currently undergoing treatment in the hospital. Sarah refused to heal him with her own skills. When he comes to, he will be transferred to prison where he will be interrogated. The girl is still in the interrogation room at the Hunters Association. Now she uses the law enforcement silence and does not say a word, but demands a meeting only with Sponge and Jason. The girl thought most likely something happened between them in the morning in the dungeon. She then added that if, by the way, it is indicated that Sarah is a member of a popular idol group, Roger said that he now understood where he knows her from. The hero said that she was most likely forced into the contract in order to use her skills. He destroyed the bracelet that bound her. Therefore, she will no longer have anything to do with Michael. Later, he will go to the association and visit her, and then he will ask what the head of Ricardo is doing here. The man stated that there was only one reason he came to this closet. George asked if it was the heart of a giant golem. But Mr. Jason had destroyed it in the dungeon, and everyone present looked at him and asked what he was saying. The guild leader shouted, "Was he out of his mind? How could he destroy this super rare artifact?" The main character in turn used his inventory and took out this thing from there. He said, in fact, that what was destroyed in the dungeon was a fake. He thought that he broke the copied one, so it was a fake. George wondered how what was destroyed in the dungeon was fake, because it couldn't be. Then how to explain the clearing of the dungeon? So, what was it? Did he do something? Ricardo offered 50 billion and said that he would sell it. So what about this amount? Elizabeth told him not to be surprised at such a sum. And this item is worth more than this money. The association can offer 80 billion. Roger told the elder to look at this. At auctions, items start at 100 billion. Those present said why he said that. Ricardo got angry and asked him why he thought he had gone so far because this guy had promised to sell it to him. So he went on to shout, "How about 200 billion? If that's not enough, let him name the price he's willing to sell it for." After a short period of time, the hero was lying at home with the artifact in his hands, thinking that this couldn't be. Was it really worth 200 billion? That is, he will secretly put the copied Golem heart up for auction overseas, so he will become obscenely rich soon. Because of this, the guy was happy and thought that, in addition, thanks to clearing the dungeon, his level rose to almost 300. Then he stood up and said that he had been so carried away by the money that he had completely forgotten about the unique award. That's why I went to my inventory and took it out. The system said that it was a sealed item and I poured some mana into it. You can remove the seal. Jason noted that when it came to talking about it, it was as easy as pie for him. So he did that, and he had another thing in his hands called a dimensional particle. The system said by collecting all the particles he could create a dimensional key, which will open the doors to the desired dimensions, and particles are attracted to each other. Their number, as well as the level of available ones, depends on the level of the key. The hero thought that another particle of dimensions would turn out to be the key, one of 5, which means there are 4 more. But why wasn't it automatically copied? Naturally, the guy tried to copy it, but the system reported that this was an item that could not be copied and pasted. Jason realized that he couldn't be copied, which meant he would have to assemble everything himself. But that was bad. The skill seemed to be becoming useless. A few moments later, the guy heard a knock on the door and asked who was there. It turned out that it was George who approached him and said that he wanted to clarify something with him. The guy asked if this gentleman was still awake. After a few moments, they looked at each other, quite hostilely. The main character saw that the man who came to him was holding his own weapon in his hands. So the guy got up from his seat and asked what this man was up to. The man, in turn, did not stop for a second and immediately rushed into the attack. So after a few moments, the guy's body was pierced by his blade. 15 years ago, Europe spoke when a terrible catastrophe occurred. The monsters were smashing everything around. One of them was a level 500 plus drake, a creature classified as a lower type of dragon, but its characteristics were comparable to the higher ones. People were shouting that this creature, using fire, and the first to pursue him, was inflicting a magical explosion with the attribute of ice. The wizard who arrived at the scene of the battle shouted that he understood everything. The woman walked towards him and immediately used her technique called Ice Bolt. The creature, in turn, did not let this attack pass so easily and hid behind its wings. The man said that there wasn't a single scratch on him, but the interlocutor asked if such an ultra monster from the class really appeared out of nowhere and they couldn't handle it themselves. Drake didn't stop for a second. That's why he attacked the rest of the people using his fire. Those caught in this massive attack tried to hide, running away to avoid being reached by the deadly fire. But the creature circled around itself and tried to kill as many people as possible. One of the men ran away and told George that they should run because they couldn't fight it. The appearance of an abnormal monster plunged the world into hell. As the newly awakened novice hunter, the man resigned himself to death. But suddenly he heard someone turn to him and ask if this newcomer was okay. The guy immediately opened his eyes at that moment and did not believe that he was still alive. It turned out that right in front of him was the man who had just saved him. George looked at him carefully and wondered if this could really be the legendary man. Because he can say for sure that he is a world legend and hunter Frederick Hugh, the guy thought. Thank God, he was saved. Within moments, Drake, who had been raging all this time, was defeated. George was stunned when he saw the huge amount of blood in front of him. The creature was still alive, but looked away in a rather strange way. Soon something strange began to happen in his stomach, like small explosions, and it was bursting into pieces. So when his body reached its peak, it shattered into small pieces to the sides. Of course, he was amazed by that same legendary hunter Frederick. George realized that he had done it, and thought it was just amazing. He thought, wait, hadn't he just been killed? He doesn't actually see the body, but then it's unclear what's happening. Soon a girl appeared who told Frederick that she had told him not to use it in front of strangers. The guy thought that he had not realized when she arrived. So was it really she who saved him from that huge explosion? The man stated that it was an emergency, and this was the fastest way to defeat the entity. The girl noticed, of course, his scales were as hard as a dragon's. If they had left this country, it could have been destroyed. Frederick came closer to the man and said what he had just seen. Would he keep it a secret? The interlocutor was a little surprised, but said that of course he would do so. The rest of the hunters came and said that it couldn't be clear who defeated Drake, and even someone tore him apart like that. Frederick said that he thought it was time for them to leave. The girl added that what she said was true. The guy stood up and said that he had recently become a hunter. His name was George Grant and the Grant family, and that was why he was asking people to remember him. In response to this, Frederick said that he would remember him and gave his full name. George thought it was the hunter whose skill surpassed death and the greatest hunter in the world, Frederick Hugh. But at the time, the boy had no idea. It doesn't matter that after this person disappears, he will meet another with the same abilities, but he wants to see it with his own eyes. And right now he wanted his predictions to turn out to be correct. And the hero used his power and put the weapon to his neck and then asked what he was trying to do. The man thought that, as he thought, Jason had the same skill as Frederick Hugh. The interlocutor said that he was really sorry, but he just wanted to check and see his skill with his own eyes. The hero said that he tried to kill him to check. Suddenly, they heard Roger addressing the elder and looked at him. The boy was very surprised and scared at that moment, so he asked what was going on here. The hero asked him why he was still there and understood that this was all becoming problematic. After a while, George bowed down and said that he was really sorry. Jason said that everything was fine and asked who taught him to apologize with worship. Lucy said it was her. She heard that when she commits a great crime in the East, this is how they apologize. The hero noted that for the murder of such insufficient. The man said that in connection with this, in order to atone for his guilt, he would stay with him. The guy said that he should not decide everything on his own. Roger asked if the elder really had the same resurrection skill as Frederick, but the other man told him not to call him that. The subordinate noticed that this was the possibility of returning to life after death, and that was why the hero was so strong. The hero thought that they should be allowed to think incorrectly for now. He said it didn't matter, and then asked why Lucy hadn't come back either. The interlocutor handed over the artifact and said that she needed to talk to him about this issue. Jason realized that this was the very same piece that he had recently received as a reward. The hero asked if her spatial object had suddenly started to resonate. Lucy replied that it had. She followed him and was surprised when he brought her into this room. Her piece of the artifact is called number 1, but Hunter Jason's is number 5, so she wonders where he got it. The guy said he got this when he destroyed the heart of a giant golem, and it was a unique reward. Lucy said she saw that they might need to investigate. The part of the artifact that she has is one of her mother's keepsakes. Referring to the notes left by her mother, these parts resonate with each other and are also attracted to each other, as has just been proven. Does this mean that maybe they will now be able to find the remaining pieces of the artifact more easily? Roger remarked that, speaking of which, it would be interesting to see what they could do with it. Lucy noted that if they collect them all, it is said to be the key to opening the door of dimensions. Jason asked if they could actually open the door with this. Maybe they were like the multi-dimensional dungeon they found. The girl replied that everything was correct. If there were multi-dimensional dungeons, like the golem hidden in the snowfield, by collecting the parts, they would have to form a key. Therefore, they should be able to freely open and close the door between dimensions, as well as travel through them. The guy said that this meant that Lucy came to Japan not only to look for the whereabouts of her mother, but also to collect information about this artifact. The girl said that everything was correct. She believed that her mother and father were alive somewhere in another dimension. George said that he agreed, because he could not imagine them dying. Roger asked if that was the case, then why didn't they come back? Could it be that they don't have the key to this dimension or the door can only be opened from this side? Lucy stated that it was certainly possible, or maybe they were staying there for a reason. The hero thought that they were deciding not to return, so perhaps they had some other reason to stay. It could be something more terrible than even the Great Disaster. Jason noted that in any case, if they could open and close the dimension door with the key, they could also close the multi-dimensional dungeons to prevent a catastrophe. Roger wondered how this thing became a key. At the same time, a small golem reached out to her with its hand. Because of this, he pushed the two particles towards each other, and they collided violently. And after just a few moments, they changed their orientation and stood as they should next to each other. Soon, there was only a bright flash of light as well as a force that spread throughout the area. Roger asked what this was because he thought he was going to die. Lucy looked at what happened and said, "Did these particles really stick together?" Then she reached for this so-called key and said that she was surprised. She thought it was cool. They'd collect all the particles and then it wouldn't turn into a key, but it just stuck together and became one, so now she's convinced of it. The hero looked at her in surprise, not fully understanding what she was talking about. He asked if it was true that the resonant sound had become even louder, and that these parts were also attracted to each other. Lucy said, "And the stronger the sound becomes, the stronger the pulling force. They have to be careful when resonating these parts with other parts." The girl is sure that the person who has them is not an ordinary person. The one who had them finally said that they will be able to return home. An interesting conversation took place in the Starfield Guild's European apartment. The main one asked the girl why she was laughing, because those guys from the Bloody Tower Guild had failed their mission. Sylvia said that finally the chief received the gift of movement. They congratulate him, because he took another step on the path to becoming transcendental. The man said that now he can only use it to move a short distance, but eventually he will be able to make it grow only with the help of copying skills. The elf noted that this could soon become possible, and the interlocutor asked on what grounds she was talking about this. The girl noticed that the part in her hands began to resonate, so one of the 5 parts was connected to the other, and the one they had should tell where the rest were. Jonathan asked if she wanted to say that all 5 pieces of the artifact had been found. It looked like she would be able to return home soon. The girl replied that everything was correct. The man asked if her place of residence didn't have its own key. Sylvia replied that it was not so, one of them was, but now it was impossible to open the spatial door from the other side. It happened 15 years ago because of the magician Jennifer. All spatial doors that were connected to the ground are closed by a key that is on the ground, on the other side. It was divided into 5 parts, and all of them were sealed in different places. Jonathan said, and once they collect these parts, they will open the lock, but will the spatial door open again? The interlocutor noted that everything is correct. First, they will open a spatial door to the land of fairies, to her homeland, a sacred tree. There is a gift there that is similar to the skill of copying, and if a man can apply this, he will be able to develop his other gifts. Jonathan said that it sounded good, of course, but was it really the same as copying? She had been surprised when she first saw his skills. Sylvia was a little wary and didn't know what to say to this. The man asked if she really thought he didn't know her intentions. Her home world was the dimension of elves. Their world tree was charged several hundred years ago, and now it is called dark to top it off. It is also on the verge of extinction. And he did not try to move the source of this massacre to the earth, but it did not work, because Jennifer stopped her. But what they really want. Does the elf plan to continue her failed operation and connect the earthly dimension with her own? And she uses him to achieve this. The elf wanted to say that this was not so. The man said that he was not interested in all this. He wanted to use her to open more multidimensional dungeons, and as a result, absorb even more skills so that in the end he becomes equal to the transcendental. What will happen to this world does not concern him at all. From now on, he will personally take action. Sylvia shouted that he should not leave right now because he is the head of the International Guild Starfield. If he moves without any justifiable reason, he may attract unwanted attention and become someone to be feared. So once the training is complete, they will have enough reason for him to move somewhere. In the Forest of Death in the Japanese dungeon, a monster was raging. This creature is called Knoll, and it is level 90. These monsters, which are a mixture of goblin and wolf, although individually they may have low combat power, they are very intelligent and act in packs, which makes them very dangerous. And it was precisely these monsters that noticed the people and immediately rushed to attack them. Roger asked the elder if there were many of them here. George was next to them and said that this was it. They had better retreat. Jason figured this was a dungeon he'd finally gotten into because he'd asked Elizabeth about it. So there was no way in hell he was going to back out. This is the perfect chance to level up the golems, so I asked the creatures what they were waiting for and let them hurry up and approach him. It was unclear whether the monsters understood him or not, but they still rushed to attack even more vigorously. His comrades were surprised and did not understand what this man was doing. The monsters continued to run at a speed that was not his speed, and all they could do was wait. The system reported that the golem core was used and golems are being created. And very soon, an incredible number of these nuclei were obtained. So the protagonist released his army of familiars and they rushed forward. Roger asked where the golems had come from, and the man asked if it was the guy who had summoned them. The hero smiled and said that it was eye for eye and pack for pack. George wondered if he could summon so many golems that they didn't understand what the hell happened and what the true nature of this skill was. A hybrid of a goblin and a wolf just attacked those same little golems. One of the creatures tried to bite the baby on the head, but nothing good came of it. Roger said that no matter how strong the golems are, the difference in their vitality and level is simply colossal. But after a few moments, the familiar that was attacked first killed the creature that did it. So the monster flew away at the same second to a very large distance. And the army of small fans rushed into the attack because they understood that they would win. As a result, after just a few moments, the monsters were destroyed. Roger noticed that it looked like the elders would be fine with one, so it was unclear why he had even come here. The main character's army finally won and stood angrily before those creatures. The guy came up to them and said that it was good that he managed to test the strength and the difference in power of each level. After this, he ordered his subordinates not to return immediately. They immediately obeyed him, and the guy could see the golem core appear in his inventory. Jason noted that he didn't have enough inventory space to create a squad, And depending on their size and their regeneration, it could also take time. I wonder if there is a better way to do this, Roger asked in that case why he didn't ask Master Ricardo about it. The hero asked why he should ask about this. The guy answered that he still depends on the dungeon, and he is sure that he knows something. Jason asked if this was serious and should be done right now, so he told George to hurry. The man said he understood everything and thought it was not worth leaving work. Soon, the main character and his subordinate drove into the car. The guy asked if it was his car. Roger said yes. His father gave it to him for his birthday. The hero said that he sees this. In addition to everything else, this is also a full-fledged option. He thought that now that he found out about this guy is definitely the son of Master Dalton. The guy called Elizabeth and said that it was a good job, then asked if she was going to the association now. Now he understood everything and immediately headed there. The subordinate noticed that it was a rather sudden call, and what happened? The hero noticed that he was surprised and thought that this was probably about Sarah, although in any case, he himself had business with her. So I asked Roger if they could speed it up, and of course he agreed. Soon the guy finally arrived at the association and was already in the interrogation room. Sarah sat alone at the table, her gaze absent and also very thoughtful. Elizabeth said that she insisted on talking to Jason. For 3 whole days now, she has not eaten or drunk water, but still remains completely silent. The hero asked if they could keep their conversation off the record. The girl apologized and said that it was impossible due to the nature of this investigation. Jason thought, come what may, even if the true nature of his cursed skill was revealed here, he could still adopt her skill and undo all of this, because that's his top priority right now, and he headed to the interrogation room. The first thing he did was approach Sarah and immediately put a glass of water in front of her. Then he noticed that it was just water and let her drink it. The girl said nothing in response to this and only sat silently for a while. But soon she reached for the glass that the guy handed her and began to drink it greedily. Elizabeth said she was now free of dehydration. Jason asked if he was right in thinking that she wanted to know about his skill, namely creating infinite mana. The interlocutor said that if he helps him, she will definitely cooperate with the investigation, and the guy said that before that, he needs to confirm something. Then I noticed that her ability to restore things and she was hit by a cursed skill, and this skill is cancellation. As a result, the girl said that he was saying everything correctly. The hero realized that he knew this because he was not the only one who was cursed. In other words, if he could just copy and paste her skills, that would mean any damn skills could be copied and pasted. I thought to myself, is it really true that this girl's skill is not healing but restoration? So it means that it was because of this that the durability of the longsword was restored. Such a skill is quite significant for killing. Roger was surprised to hear these words and thought, no way, they say such skills exist. Sarah said that her mother, as well as her father, are now in a coma, so she asked for help to restore them. The only one who can provide such a large amount of mana is him. Jason says he understands. He will give her as much mana as she needs. In exchange, he will be a little rude and immediately apologizes for it. So he immediately approached the girl and immediately touched her shackles. Roger asked the elder what he was doing. And a few moments later, the handcuffs that were on the girl's hands immediately fell apart. The main character, in turn, did not stop for a second and immediately grabbed the girl by the hand. The system, in turn, informed the guy about copying the cancellation skills. Soon, a message appeared that it could not be copied, and the hero wondered if he was serious. Of course, he had armed himself that there were abilities that he could not copy. But I didn't think that actually meeting with the day one of them is all bad. Is it really impossible? Sarah asked in surprise what he was doing right now. Jason came to his senses a little after these words and immediately apologized for this situation. Then he noticed an error that appeared in front of him. The system said that the special ability could not be copied, but if he eliminated the target, he could absorb it. If he fulfills this condition, he will then be able to copy abilities as usual. The guy realized that if we are talking about eliminating targets, then is this really murder? And if he does this, will he be able to copy the ability as usual? It looks like he's being bullied into copying a skill that cancels something he'd have to kill Sarah with, as if he could do that. But he really wants to copy and paste this skill, so is there no other way? He also can't wait for her to die of old age. Roger asked the others why the windows suddenly opened. Elizabeth turned to the main character and asked what was wrong, because he suddenly became very serious. The guy said nothing terrible happened. Everything was fine. After that, he thought that in this case, this is now a test of endurance. He will be the first to fulfill Sarah's request and earn her trust. And in the near future, he might find a better method. And if he doesn't find a better method to unite with her, so he told the girl to go immediately to her parents. That same day, they went to the Central Hospital for Hunters. The hero asked if it was mana poisoning. Sarah replied that it was true that they were attacked by a mysterious monster during the Great Disaster, and this hospital was the only one that suffered from mana poisoning. Jason realized that this is why they were being hospitalized here. She must have teamed up with Michael to earn money for the hospital treatment. He then asked if it was true that Michael was also being treated here, Elizabeth confirmed, and he was currently in the underground facility. After he is cured, they plan to transfer him to prison and conduct an investigation, then asked Sarah if she was worried. But the interlocutor replied that everything was fine, and suddenly George saw something strange. A foreigner walked past him, and the man realized that he knew him since he had been working in the association for a long time. That's why I paid attention to him and didn't understand why this person was here. And he, in turn, did not stop and continued walking towards the ward, near which there was a guard. One of them saw him and told him to stop because this area is prohibited, and entry without permission is also prohibited. The guy handed over a piece of paper and said he thanked them for their hard work. The guard picked it up and saw that it had the name of the search skill on it and didn't understand what it was. But just a few moments after he said this, he saw dark magic in front of him. Both guards were terrified as dark energy was heading straight towards them at incredible speed. Very soon, both of them were completely absorbed by this energy. In their subconscious, it seemed to them that they were somewhere far away, but in fact they were in the same place, but had become dark. Charlie told them to bring the man who was inside now and let them do what needed to be done and come back here. They obeyed immediately. After that, the foreigner headed forward in the direction where there was some kind of capsule. And when he approached her, you used dark magic again and a purple ball appeared in your hands. Sylvia had said earlier that she had a job that only he could do. The guy was surprised and asked about it. The girl showed him the ball and said that in the unlikely event that the blood tower collapsed, she wanted him to place it all over Tokyo. Charlie asked what kind of thing it was. The elf said that she brought it from her homeland. This is the fruit of the tree of the polluted world. With the help of this fruit, you can create a barrier, and it will open the space. The guy asked what she meant by opening up space. The girl said that you have to see it to believe it. After a while, Charlie saw something that really struck him, and he didn't expect to see it. The interlocutor used the object that she wanted to give him, then said that it was only one fruit, and she could show him only this. She wants to give the Starfield organization, as well as Jonathan, a reason to go public. The guy wondered if this meant that she wanted to build an escape from the dungeon of his Tokyo. The organization and he are closely connected by families, so now he definitely cannot retreat. The man, who had been unconscious for a long time, finally got up and took off his mask. He was very surprised. So he asked how it was he really alive? After that, I looked to the side and was not surprised when I saw familiar faces. There was also his absolutely living wife, as well as his own daughter. He turned to Sarah and she reciprocated. Roger stood and looked at this heartbreaking atmosphere with tears in his eyes. Elder sister was shocked when she saw how he treated these people. After that, she hit the boy on the head and asked why he was the only one crying. He told the elder that he knew his infinite mana was amazing, but he thought that it could actually revive a person who had lost consciousness. While she doesn't even know if the best healers in the world can handle this, Elizabeth understood that this recovery was incredible. If there was even one mistake, then everything would be bad. The girl would really have to use association to save this child. Although she decided that she should witness it herself, the guy told the girl to think about it and wonder where George is. Lucy replied that now that he remembered it, she didn't understand where he was either. Charlie, trying to hide his identity, walked forward with the man. After a very short period of time, he stopped because the system gave him information. His search skill indicated that a person with a similar ability had been discovered. The guy immediately took off his hat and asked if there was a user of such a skill in the hospital. The man in front asked what the hell he was talking about, and then realized that Sarah's parents were in this hospital. Let them just not tell him the guy is standing there, somehow connected to him. Suddenly, someone called Charlie's full name. It turned out to be George, who said that the boy was hiding his face with a hat, so he almost didn't recognize him. The man remarked to him, "I wonder what brought someone from the International Hunters Association to Japan." And in the end, he wanted Michael as Straffield's dog. Charlie said, "I heard he left the International Hunters Association, so what is he doing here?" George used magic and started to take out his weapon, saying that the man next to him was a criminal, so he, who was helping him, was one too. The foreigner said that he sees how reckless he always is, and doesn't he see that this is a hospital? Michael asked him to give him a weapon, because all his inventory was confiscated. Since he crossed over alone, he only wants this man to teach him a lesson. because in reality he is very weak and will not do anything himself. Suddenly Jason appeared and said that he was here too. The man noticed that he was a scoundrel, because it was unclear how he dared to show this ability. A few moments later, Charlie saw that the system had informed him of a new search. This man was said to have the ability to copy, and also at the rate. Charlie immediately smiled and thought that he had finally found the copying skill right in front of him. At the same time, Elizabeth came up and said it was terrible. Because one thing after another happened. First Michael, and now international crime. That's why, without thinking for a second, I immediately took out my weapon. The man looked forward and saw that it was his friend who possessed a witchblade. The guy was also surprised at the same time and wondered if this final boss had suddenly appeared to put an end to everything. The girl said that her horoscope said that today she was unlucky in the most unfortunate and unlucky way possible, which is probably why all the overtime exists. People said that it was Elizabeth the Hunter and she was holding her weapon, so it was unclear what happened. Michael wondered if they couldn't just relax. A few moments after his words, he saw several pairs of handcuffs in front of him. They asked if these were restraining devices. The girl noted that if they could put it on themselves, then they could resolve everything peacefully, and she could also go home early. The interlocutor smiled and said that it was quite humiliating. After that, he turned to the ordinary citizen and immediately grabbed her by the clothes. At the same time, he asked if this hospital really doesn't understand that he can take any patient hostage if they don't want anyone to be harmed. In that case, they should resolve all this peacefully. Elizabeth did not listen to him at all and rushed into the attack, immediately striking. The blow was so strong that the man did not have time to react and was thrown a very long distance. Without stopping his body, he hit the wall hard. So much so that blood immediately gushed from his mouth and he lost concentration. People were shouting that the hunters were fighting for them and they needed to run away. Charlie was horrified and thought that the attack was too fast and he didn't even see it. The girl interrupted his thoughts and turned to him. Then she asked if he was really different from Michael and if this should be resolved peacefully. The interlocutor did not respond to this and only turned his head to the side. I looked at the man who had just been literally hit and wondered if they were any different. Are they really different or not? He immediately remembered the conversation with the elf, whom he asked why he was chosen. The girl replied that the space tree was infected with dark mana. Ordinary people can get mana poisoning from dark mana. But is it true that it doesn't concern him? And that the owner of the Bloody Tower is also the same? When the guy was surprised when he heard that he was the same as Michael, Sylvia continued to say that it was all true. He also violated the international treaty for using skills that required dark mana. This is done so that in order to make the infected space tree bloom, they need to use skills that depend on this dark force. The guy noticed that, in other words, he was the same because he had used power recently. Smiling a little, he exhaled and said that he was the same as Michael. Therefore, he can say that this whole situation cannot be resolved peacefully. He immediately began to take out his own weapon and said that he needed this man. That's why he will take it and leave, no matter what. Elizabeth noticed his weapon and thought that this ball was quite familiar. George said it was the Angelus rapier, and the guy seemed to be really serious. The hero asked what he meant. The man noted that this ball has been passed down from generation to generation in a family of holy knights in Britain, and that it is the only holy ball in the entire world. It is of the same rank as the Calician dragon longsword. The sword specializes in cutting rather than stabbing. The hero was surprised by its level. I must say that it is correct. But it is different from the longsword. It does not have attack power, but it adjusts the level, also known as the Heretic Inquisitor. It can nullify all skills and weapons that it considers kinetic. Elizabeth uses a magic sword, the Witchblade, so it's bad. And so, after a few moments, the opponent's weapons clashed. The girl noticed that her weapon was starting to lose, and therefore the fight was not going well. Jason saw that she had missed a punch and immediately began to worry. Elizabeth told him not to interfere because, if he made more noise, he would disturb the order in the hospital. After that, she immediately pushed away her opponent's weapon and he was shocked. Then she jumped up and prepared to strike him with her sword. Charlie noticed the rather swift attack and jumped back, then asked if he wasn't going to use his skills just because they were in the hospital. And maybe she thinks she can win like this with her weapon. While the foreigner was distracted by his conversations, he noticed that a weapon was already flying towards him. Luckily for him, he still managed to react and thrust his sword straight out in front of him. But holding such a weapon was quite difficult for him because he was strong. That is why, under the pressure of the girl, he had to retreat back again. When the guy did this, he felt blood pouring from his nose. He realized that just by blocking her attack, his internal organs were damaged even before moving on to the compatibility of the swords. The difference in level between them was colossal. It turns out that it was this power of the 10th strongest hunter in the world that the girl asked if he wanted to resolve everything peacefully now. At that moment, Charlie was already starting to panic and decided that since they were in the hospital, he didn't want to use his special skills unless necessary. Suddenly, Michael turned to them and said that the huntress was just a scoundrel. Everyone immediately turned their attention to him and saw that the man was already conscious. He stood up and it was clear that a dark flower was growing from his stomach. With a smile on his face, he declared that this was the very hospital that they so desperately wanted to protect. And he, in turn, will erase his entire existence completely and immediately planted a flower. Charlie immediately yelled at him to stop and not do this because this was a hospital. The man asked if he understood correctly that this person was going to place him in key places in Tokyo. In that case, they should leave this flower in this hospital as well. The protagonist asked what Michael was talking about, and the guy was persuaded. George turned his attention forward and said that it was dark mana. The guy asked about it in surprise, and the ally said that the mana that dark skill users possess seems to be something that Michael also understands how to use. There is too much of this dark force. If it continues like this, ordinary people in the hospital will be poisoned by it. The protagonist used giant spider silk and simultaneously activated the shadow movement skill. At the same time, he stated that the person who did all this was simply a scoundrel. At the same time, tied him up and shouted at him to stop this whole situation right now. But Michael said there was nothing he could do, and it was too late. The hero asked in surprise if he was really telling the truth. Well, the flower that this man planted actually released dark mana in large quantities. The force spread quite quickly throughout the hospital, penetrating literally every corner. It was because of her that even ordinary civilians suffered. The dark tree gradually spread its root, and very soon the hospital was completely saturated with this power. Very soon a huge tree appeared, on which parts of the hospital were held. The doctor held the patient down, who was hanging and begging him to help her. But after a few moments he couldn't hold her back, and her body immediately began to fall down. The girl was very scared at that moment and started screaming very loudly. But fortunately, the main character could use his threads, which he used to save her. And after just a few moments he laid it on the ground quite calmly. He then asked her if everything was okay and asked her to follow him to evacuate. She smiled sweetly when she saw him and thanked him. And the hero thought that the patient was moving on her own, and that was already good. But the situation that happened now looks very scary. So he looked down and saw that there were a lot of patients there who were very injured. Some of them couldn't move on their own. Then he looked to the side and saw that Elizabeth, as well as George, were taking care of others right now. The hospital is overflowing with dark mana. And if this continues, it will infect them all. And if that happens, it will be very bad. In that case, they will be forced to literally rebuild the entire hospital using Sarah's ability. There were quite a lot of people under the rubble. Roger and his golem were just rescuing a man, and he asked them to lift a piece of the belt. This is excellent work, and they will do it soon. Soon, the main character appeared here and immediately turned to his subordinate. The guy noticed him and said that he was the elder, but he was interested in what really happened here. The little helper, at the same time, threw a huge fragment to the side. Jason came closer and asked if everything was under control here. The guy noted that this department was safe, thanks to Lucy. The main character was surprised because he didn't know that the girl would be right there. Soon he came closer and noticed a huge amount of ice that was holding the hospital. So I touched the crystals and asked if it was really ice. The girl replied that he understood everything correctly, and it was an ice barrier. This helped prevent the hospital ward from being destroyed, but it couldn't completely block the dark mana. A few moments later, the interlocutor destroyed it so that the guy could enter. He and his subordinate began to walk and said that in any case, he was glad that they were safe. He said that a strange tree destroyed most of the hospital, and the spread of dark mana makes the situation even more dangerous. The fastest way to solve this problem is to restore the hospital. But it may be too early, as the girl thinks. Is she ready for this? Sarah said. She can do it. Because she had already recovered from the dungeon, namely because of Jason, they didn't have to worry about mana. So soon, the tree arrived, and Roger noticed that it was bigger than he expected. So was this tree the reason, but where did it come from and how did it get here? Jason noticed that this robot of Michael's he escaped, and then this tree appeared. Sarah realized that he knew her parents were here, but he did it anyway, so he didn't care if they died. Lucy walked up to the trunk of this huge tree and began to examine it carefully. The protagonist said that the restoration should begin, and the ally agreed. Immediately after that, he gradually began to gather his power and direct mana directly towards the girl. She, in turn, touched the tree and began to use her power on it. And when I started doing this, the tree gradually moved on its own. The main character, in turn, felt some pain, and therefore even groaned a little. But very soon the roots of the trees began to gradually retreat in the other direction. Elizabeth, as well as George, were still near the civilians and watched what was happening. Very soon they saw that the roots, which had completely filled the entire hospital, began to retreat. Sarah continued to use her power, and so everything returned inside the tree. Dark magic also penetrated there in large quantities. Very soon it spread, and the girl also fell under its influence. The hero saw this and thought that the dark bathroom had just come out of the woodwork. His ally was in danger, and this was bad. Jason immediately stopped using his mana and rushed towards Sarah to help her. It was also at this point that he told the system to use the spider thread. But the dark mana did not stop and continued to touch his body, and did so quite freely. In order to get out of there faster, the hero used Shadow Step. When Roger saw him, he asked if he was okay because mana was coming from him. Jason noticed that everything was fine, but Sarah had lost consciousness, and it seemed that they were unable to restore the tree. The guy told his subordinate that until more help arrives, they should start evacuating patients from the hospital. They must move quickly, otherwise the dark mana will infect everyone. Roger picked up Sarah and told his friend that they should run away. The protagonist turned to Lucy and asked what she thought about this and if she knew what kind of tree it was. The interlocutor answered based on the notes left by her mother that it comes from another dimension. Most likely it is the fruit of a corrupted cosmic tree. The purpose of the fruit is to hold the source of energy from another dimension and also to bring that very power into this world. Since the main part of the space tree exists in another dimension, the spell restoration did not work. The girl thinks that the fruit acts as a barrier. Therefore, it must be placed in 3 or 4 key points in Tokyo. 10 minutes later, the event occurred in front of the central hospital. Rescuers arrived on the scene and said that they had to move quickly because they needed to transfer emergency patients immediately. Hunters also arrived here and used their magic to help. One of the guys asked if it was true about the Wizard of the Midas Guild. "Let him hurry to clean her dark mana," the hunter said to cover his mouth, "because he is trying, but he can't do anything. If he continues like this, he will simply waste his mana and nothing will come of it." The elves said that the infected space tree from another dimension is right in the center of Tokyo. Even seeing it with his own eyes, he can't believe it. Elizabeth noticed that she was apologizing and had already put out a search warrant for both Michael and Charlie. Simon remarked, "Who would have thought that the girl would let someone like Michael just run away? So could it really be all because of Charlie? If he was involved in this, wouldn't it be easier to confront Starfield and the Hunters Association?" Ricardo noted while talking about this. Bloody Tower, Japanese Guild. They can use this and say in justification why they are asking them to solve the problem caused by the Japanese hunter. There is no need to worry about this because the man will soon catch Michael. Those present heard some strange noise, and someone asked what was causing the shaking. Was the hospital about to collapse? One of the hunters shouted to the chairman that they had a serious problem now, and the man asked what happened. A subordinate shouted that a second tree had just appeared in the Kita area. Jason immediately thought of Michael and realized that there really was a second one. Indeed, in that very place that the guy was talking about recently, there was a tree. On the news today, they said that 2 large mysterious trees appeared in different places. And the Hunters Association also found that dark mana was released by these trees, and it rules as poison, so the government issued an order. About the emergency evacuation in the Tokyo jurisdiction, the man asked where they were not planning to evacuate them. And the children were glad that there would be no school tomorrow at that moment. Michael was riding in the car with a smile on his face and saying that in this situation they definitely wouldn't get them. Then he turned to the man who pulled him out and said that he was also quite ruthless. Even he never thought of brainwashing people with dark mana. The reporter kept saying that people would not be affected by mana. So for 24 hours there is no need to panic. Everyone should remain calm and follow the police instructions. Currently, the Hunters Association, the police, and the self-defense forces work together. They are also doing everything possible to resolve the situation as quickly as possible. Michael noticed that his ally was thinking, polluting people and turning them into puppets. Charlie got angry about this and said that he was a scoundrel and should stop acting like he knew what he was talking about. The man told him not to be angry because he had praised him, and they should be desperately looking for them right now. But as long as they moved together, no one would find them. In that case, he was absolutely sure that those looking for them did not expect them to ride in a police car. Only 3, so it was time to get down to business. Around this time, a conversation took place in the chairman's office. Georg noticed that he was being told that there was a chance about these 3 of the contaminated trees. So they won't appear around Tokyo to create some kind of barrier, Lucy said. At least according to her mother's notes, and that's true. It seems that the infected trees also appeared during the Great Disaster. and they serve as a barrier and gate so that the infected monsters will flood into Tokyo. Ricardo wondered if they had been there during the Great Disaster. The main character was actually horrified when he heard this information. He remembered the moment from his childhood when that very route appeared. The boy asked his dad if everything would be okay. His dad said everything was still okay. Let him make sure he was sitting correctly and be sure to grab on tightly. After that, he stepped on the gas and the car started to go quite fast. The man noticed that everything was bad, and it was turning out like what his friend had said. But who in the world would use this in the city center? The tree continued to spread and suddenly one of the roots headed straight towards the car. The main character was very scared then and immediately shouted to his father. He doesn't even know why he remembered it now. It might also have some connection to his curse, so what destroyed the machine then? It probably wasn't a monster, but an infected tree. If the same person is behind this as before, the guy will never forgive him for it. Georg said as far as he remembered at the time, a huge tree had definitely appeared in Tokyo, but he was so busy escaping from the dungeon that he didn't have time to pay attention. So then there was also a barrier. Lucy said that this is, so according to her mother's recording, a barrier of infected trees will work as a gate to another dimension, and also opens under the space. Elizabeth asked what she was saying, Ricardo noticed. But there is no need to set a barrier only for the subscription agreement. Why don't they use the contaminated trees of another dimension? It can't be to open up the dark spirit space, right? Elizabeth said that you need to open it to create a barrier of contaminated trees, or at least that's what she heard. The space will require dark mana, from which the dark aura crumbled and one infected tree will not be enough. Lucy said that now, it probably will not open. But in the worst-case scenario, a door to a polluted dimension could also open. The hero thought that if they were talking about subspaces, then they could also be talking about infinite ones. Why didn't he think of this before? If he was able to use it well, then he would also be able to solve the inventory storage problem. Isn't it possible then to create infinite golems? He can't just miss this chance, so no matter what, he will definitely catch who is behind this and get what he wants. Simon asked why they weren't telling the real story. They were talking about the size key or whatever they called it. But in reality, it doesn't exist, and he's never even seen anything like it before. The hero took it out and asked if he was really talking about this little thing. The man immediately looked at him and was simply stunned by this. At the same time, I asked if this was really the very key he was talking about. Lucy noticed that this memory of her mother was now combined with another part that the hunter Jason acquired in the snowy mountains of the Golem. The man asked, "So, does it really exist?" But it turns out that these two products will not be able to do anything. The girl said from her mother's recording of the Great Disaster in England, a contaminated dimensional door opened. She doesn't think it's a coincidence that two objects appeared at the same time. It is likely that whoever brought the infected trees is from another dimension, and they may also be holding on to other parts. Georg said, as the girl noted, the worst-case scenario is that the dimensional door can actually open and it is no longer a problem, only Tokyo. He immediately contacted the International Hunters Association and the American Hunters Association for cooperation. Ricardo said they did not have it. After all, the part is also at his guild, and an hour has already passed. The hero and the others went to the storage room, and he thought about how huge the door looked like the entrance to a dungeon. Simon noted that he knew this master was obsessed with dungeons, but let him just think that he even had a dimensional part. Jason wondered how he managed to get it in the first place. The interlocutor stated, upon learning that this person was not saying anything, does this mean that he got it through some back alley deals and it could also be a fake? Igrai paid attention to his system and realized that it was definitely not a fake. Even in his inventory, the volumetric parts resonate strongly. Finally, the owner of this storage opened the door because he wanted to show the main character that very part. Those present began to go inside and saw a wall on which there was a part. Simon noticed that the storage was so big. But was it really only this particle that was here? The hero noticed that only Ricardo and he would leave from here. The interlocutor was very much alert when he heard this, and then asked what the hell he was doing. Lucy said the two-part explanation was quite dangerous, and who knows what will happen when they try to combine the three parts into one. Ricardo noted that they were right. Only he and Jason would go inside. This was his guild, so let them follow his orders. Simon said that he had already seen this personally, so he was not interested in anything else, but if some strange dimension opened, they would do it. If anything happened, he would kill them. That is why, before they left, he insisted that they carefully remember what he told them. The hero remarked to Master Ricardo that his unit was called Number 4. Then he asked if he could tell him where he got it. The man told him to stop saying useless things and do what he had to do. Then he used a barrier and said that as soon as he united them, he would immediately fall into his barrier. Jason noted that he should not worry. Thought he had the Dutch spider and the shadow movement skill and also hadn't even taken it out of his inventory yet. When he tried to touch this part, it began to resonate strongly. Naturally, the main character saw this and immediately became wary because he understood that this would not prevent anything good from happening to him. A few moments later, something happened and after that a large funnel was formed. The force that caused this to happen knocked down the door that was at the entrance to the vault. Elizabeth noticed that something strange seemed to have happened inside. Ricardo was stunned when he saw the dent and the strange space and tried to reach out to the hero. Suddenly, he heard the guy exhale and say that he thought he was going to die. He was also surprised when he realized what kind of ability he had made. After a few moments, he noticed the guy's voice and saw where he was, so it was definitely an instant transfer. Jason didn't think it would just jump out of his inventory and combine. He would have died if he didn't have the shadow movement skill. It was an impressive firepower. And he needed to be careful when he was going to combine the fourth part. The man wondered what was wrong with this guy. It turns out that he just used the highest level of stealth and movement skill. But what is it anyway? That's why he turned to it. The hero noticed that the master was not surprised in such a way with such a strange voice. But at that moment, the interlocutor grabbed him by the throat. But after that, he dragged him to the wall and hit him quite hard, because he saw some kind of threat in this man because of the abilities that he had done. Jason asked what had suddenly happened to him, that he was doing this because he had never expected that he would be attacked right now. And the man took advantage of his mind and shouted, became unable to use dark skills without dark mana. But he just used the shadow movement skill, so let him give him an explanation right now. The hero was wondering how he could even explain this.